that we actually need clean energy deployment in order to fund research and development and innovation. And what we're doing in Hawaii, I think, is seeing where innovation and deployment meet. So it's a very unique place to be in, and I think we have to own that space and make sure that we can really capitalize on that as a community. So a couple of updates on the companies that we've funded. We're funding about 15 companies a year now in energy storage, energy efficiency, and electricity generation, also in transportation, water, ag, et cetera. And I want to give you a few numbers about where those projects are, and many of them are in partnership with the work that you folks have done also. So STEM, our distributed battery company, I mean, Rick talked a lot about energy storage and small, big, how does that work? They're right now deploying energy systems and turning on 4 more this month. Shifted is our company that does grid interactive water heating. So we're working with Hawaiian Electric on that one as well. They're a really critical partner. They're deploying grid interactive water heaters across the west side, so a number on the west side, and they have 200 tanks that are now under control in the grid interactive water heating space. So that's basically a way to help use water heaters as a resource. One of our companies, a local homegrown company, IBIS Networks, just deployed in 3 schools with the Department of Education, so using their little plug to monitor and control devices at schools and kind of help with some of the Cool Schools initiative and how we bring AC into the schools while also making sure that they stay energy efficient and we don't blow our energy budgets on AC. Bidgely is one of our companies that does really interesting energy efficiency at the home level, and they've started their alpha pilot just last month, installing a number of different homes here in Hawaii, and they have a really interesting technology where basically have one device that goes on the home, and through your mobile phone you can see exactly where all the energy is going, and you can look from your phone at basically disaggregated use on energy, and they give you little tips like, oh hey, look, your fridge is open, stuff like that. If you want to be in on any of these pilots, we are deploying technology at many of your homes already. On our team, Jill is our tester. She puts all the technology in her house and figures out how it all works, so she's got all of this stuff in there interacting. But if you want any of this in your home to test it out, let me know. One of our companies, FreeWire, has a really cool robot where they basically take Second Life Nissan Leaf batteries and put them on a robot platform, and you can go around and do EV charging without doing trenching in parking lots, large market for kind of condos and multifamily homes. They're looking for additional pilot site for 3 more units to do that. And our company, Tervivo, which is one of our agriculture companies, has planted now over 50 acres on the North Shore in partnership with Kamehameha Schools. And their crop is an oilseed crop that you can then press and make raw oil for energy, but also make feed for cattle feed. So kind of addressing some of our agricultural challenges. So those are 6 of the 32 companies that we're working with. Next week, we're going to announce another 11 companies and 8 demonstration projects that we're funding this year. So there's a lot of momentum in this space around people wanting to do innovation in Hawaii and some of the really exciting things they're doing. These companies have also created over 200 jobs, and many of those jobs are right here in Hawaii, and you know those folks that are working there. So this is a really important economic development opportunity for the state and a really growing sector. I'll give you a little preview into one of the companies that we're going to be announcing next week, and this is actually a company that came about through a conversation with Ray and Caroline over at Hawaii Energy, which was, they said, you know, one of the really difficult to address markets is restaurant efficiency. So when we were out there recruiting companies across the nation, looking at hundreds of companies, we started looking for companies in the restaurant efficiency space. So next week, one of the companies we'll be announcing is a company that has a really innovative solution for working in mostly fast food restaurants that have really razor-thin margins, and energy is a big problem for them. So we're excited about that and about solving additional problems here that we see in the state. So on that note, I just want to mention that we are looking for more companies this year, about 15 more companies. We need more Hawaii companies in that pipeline. So if there are people that you know at the university or sort of across our communities that are starting companies, please have them apply to us. We have a new person on our team who's handling a lot of that pipeline work and also working on international partnerships, and so she's here today. Ramsey, if you can raise your hand. So she joined us, and she'll be taking a lot of those new companies. And on the international partnership side, I also want to mention that just last week we announced a partnership with New Zealand. And this one actually came about through introduction from Hawaiian Electric Industries, because the biggest energy provider in New Zealand said, you know, we want to partner with Hawaii. We want to figure out how to deploy technology. They're a really innovative company. They've partnered with Tesla. They partnered with BMW, with Mini on a number of different sort of technology plays. And we'd like to partner with Hawaii. We'd like to learn from you guys. They're about twice as big as us in terms of energy customers. So we're partnering with them and taking a lot of the lessons learned that we've done here, a lot of things that HNEI and those folks have done, and working on deploying those in New Zealand as well, and kind of learning from each other, which is really exciting for us, and I hope there'll be more good announcements about Asia Pacific this year. Last thing I want to mention is kind of what 2016 looks like. We've been working with the State Energy Office a number of these projects and kind of moving forward innovation, integrating it into the state's overall energy plan. So the innovation is actually helping solve problems, and it's not just something that's nice to have and sort of more on the economic development side, but it's completely integrated into our energy system. So we've been working with Mark and his office on that. In 2016, we'd like to see more companies in cybersecurity, water, and agriculture. So if there are folks coming to you guys, I know a lot of companies are coming to talk to the State Energy Office, talk to the university, talk to the counties about what they want to do. Feel free to send those guys our way. And then the last thing that I think we're looking for 2016 is to continue to close the gap between policy and technology. So we see a lot of interesting technology that doesn't yet have kind of the rate structures and the policy to deploy and make business models work. So that's something that we're continuing to work a lot with the state on, and how we set up demand response programs correctly, how we set up rate structures correctly, and how we kind of are responsive enough in the policy sphere to what's happening in technology. I think we're actually way ahead of where the rest of the country is on this. I mean, in general, policy tends to lag technology quite a bit, and I think that we have a smaller gap here in Hawaii, but we still have work to do. So that's what I see on the horizon for 2016. And all of these pieces require partnerships. So all of the companies that we work with and all of the progress that we've made in innovation, all of it requires partnerships with hotels, with landowners, with our energy stakeholders in the state. So again, I just want to thank everyone in this room for the work that you've done making this innovation stuff possible, and really putting Hawaii on that path of kind of capital and momentum moving into innovation in 2016. Thanks.
Okay, so last but not least, my name is Darren Okimoto. I serve as the Associate Director and Extension Leader for the University of Hawaii Sea Grant College Program. Oops. There. Okay, great. And would like to start by just thanking Mina for the opportunity to come and present at today's Hawaii Energy Policy Forum. And today's talk, by the end of my presentation, what I hope to demonstrate is how Sea Grant actually demonstrates these characteristics of integration, innovation, and cooperation, and how our position is how our program is well positioned to actually address the energy, water, climate, and other types of priority needs that our coastal communities are facing. So this slide shows our mission statement for the University of Hawaii Sea Grant College program. I'm not going to read the statement to you, but what I do want to emphasize is that there are actually, for any Sea Grant program to meet its mission, there are 3 core activities that it conducts. It conducts research, extension, and education activities that are really designed to deliver the latest scientific information that's generated at the university that provides our stakeholders the opportunity to make informed decisions on, say, the management of coastal and marine resources. Our program has actually 5 areas in which we focus or concentrate our, say, research, extension, and education activities. And these are indigenous cultural heritage, water resource sustainability, sustainable coastal development, hazard resilience in coastal communities, and sustainable coastal. We have extension agents out in American Samoa. So for example, we have one agent who's based at the American Samoa Community College in American Samoa, and also another that is based at the College of the Marshall Islands in the Marshall Islands, and a third extension agent who is based at an NGO in Ponape in the Federated States of Micronesia. So how do we achieve our mission? So basically one word, partnerships. It's all about partnerships and leveraging resources. So Sea Grant, what we try to do is form these effective strategic partnerships with a variety of different stakeholders, for example, that we list here, and basically leveraging these resources to provide the best scientific information possible so these stakeholders can make informed decisions on the management of their resources. This slide is a representative sample of the various types of organizations that we partner with. So as you scan the list, one of the things I hope you take home with you is that we formed through our 48 years of existence through our program, a variety of different partnerships at all different levels, at the local level, state, the federal, the national level, and even internationally. Now, of those three activities, the really key one to me, in my opinion, being the extension leader, has to be extension. Because what extension does really is serve as this conduit for two-way information transfer. So we have 36 extension faculty that basically take the knowledge that is generated at the university, translate that knowledge, and disseminate that to our coastal stakeholders, who in turn then can make informed decisions about the management of their resources. Our extension faculty, who also live, work, and play in these communities, are able then to identify what these priority needs and issues are, and then take that information and then transfer that information back to university researchers to inform, say, the direction of their research activities. Our program is actually organized around what we're calling centers of excellence. Currently, we have 3 centers. Our longest standing center is the Center for Smart Building and Community Design, and is led by Professor Steve Meter, who is a professor in architecture. The second center that we have is the Center for Marine Science Education, and this is a partnership with the College of Education, and this center is led by Dr. Kanisa Serafin, and she's an associate professor in the Curriculum Research and Development Group. And then our third center is the Center for Sustainable Coastal Tourism. This center is led by Dr. Denise Conan, who's a professor of economics and also the dean of the College of Social Sciences. Now, just last week, we had our Sea Grant Advisory Board meeting, which Mina was able to attend, and we announced the creation of this new center of excellence, which is the Institute for Hawaiian Language Research and Translation. So this center actually is led by Dr. Marvin Puakea Nogemeyer, who is a professor in Hawaiian language, and as maybe many of you might be aware, is the voice of the bus. And so this center actually developed because of a long-standing collaboration that we had with Puakea on working on a project involving the translation of Hawaiian language newspapers. So why these centers of excellence? Why does Sea Grant utilize these centers? Well, for one thing, what these centers do is they give us a template or framework for organizing all of our research, extension, and education activities. By their very nature, these centers also promote collaboration across the university and allow us to tap into additional expertise outside of Sea Grant so that we can bring those different expertises to bear on the coastal issues that we're trying to address. And then finally, as I mentioned a few slides earlier, these centers really serve as a vehicle or mechanism for this two-way information knowledge transfer. About 4 to 5 years ago, the former UH Manoa Chancellor, Virginia Hinshaw, instituted this university-wide hiring initiative in sustainability. So Sea Grant was one of 16 proposals that were submitted and were given the award. So the net result is that we hired 7 new tenure-track faculty over the past 3 years, and these faculty are listed here. And each of these faculty have 3/4 of their position in their home departments and 1/4 of their position in Sea Grant, which is dedicated to doing outreach. Now, the partnership with the home departments include oceanography, civil and environmental engineering, economics, urban and regional planning, and natural resources and environmental management, as well as the School of Architecture. So these faculty actually are conducting interdisciplinary research on issues related to coastal sustainability. One effective means that we found for leveraging our extension resources is by actually placing or seconding our extension faculty in our partner organizations. So starting from the top left, we have 2 extension faculty, Brad Romine and Andy Bolander, who seconded to Sam Lemelshop in the Office of Conservation and Coastal Lands in the Department of Land and Natural Resources, where they serve as technical consultants to state planners. We also have 2 faculty, Tara Owens and Ruby Papp, who are seconded to planning departments in Maui and Kauai, where they provide similar services as well to county planning staffers. On the far right-hand side, we have 6 extension faculty who are placed at the Hanauma Bay Nature Preserve, which is a city park run by the Parks and Recreation Department. And in this case, our faculty, what they do is they administer the Hanauma Bay Education Program to nearly 800,000 visitors annually. Now, on the bottom of the slide, we have 3 extension faculty who are seconded to institutions of higher learning in Hawaii and out in the Pacific region. So starting from the left, we have Carl Felenius, who's seconded to the College of the Marshall Islands. In the middle, we have Tara Owens, who's based at Maui College. And then far right, we have Kelly Anderson Tagarino, who's based at the American Samoa Community College. So in addition to conducting outreach activities, these faculty also provide teaching services. Now, in the remaining time that I have, what I wanted to do is just highlight three examples of selected partnerships that we have. So this first partnership is a partnership through the Center for Smart Building and Community Design, and is a partnership actually with Rick Shop, HNEI, and also with the School of Architecture. And so what are listed here, which I won't read, are research projects that the center has been conducting that are related, that are being done at the building scale to improve building performance and design. And one of the other neat things about this project itself is that they involve student training. So students are able to go in and get really on-the-job, hands-on training experience that really prepares them to be more competitive in the job market. The second partnership that I would like to talk about is something that is associated with our Center for Sustainable Coastal Tourism, and has to do with this newly created nonprofit called the Waikiki Beach Special Improvement District Association. So this nonprofit basically was created to handle this fund that was created by the city and county and the mayor, Caldwell, last year, that created a new tax district in Waikiki. And so basically, the property taxes that are collected from the landowners there in Waikiki are being used to exclusively support the management of beach resources in Waikiki. So our role here with the association is that we create an extension agent position that is filled by Dolan Eversole to serve as the coordinator for this particular project in managing Waikiki's beach resources. And then the final project that I would like to highlight involves the Sea Grant Network project, where in 2007, Dennis Wong, who's one of our extension faculty, created this publication called the Homeowner's Handbook to Prepare for Natural Hazards. And so this handbook really was created as a way to provide in one location all of the emergency preparedness information and all of the shelter information, and then how homeowners can actually retrofit their homes against hurricanes and, say, earthquakes. And so this is an idea that resonated greatly with the rest of the Sea Grant Network. So currently we have 7 other state Sea Grant programs that had created their own versions of the handbook. And then just last year, we also added Guam and the Republic of the Marshall Islands as well. And with that, I want to just thank you for your time. Mahalo. Thank you, Darren. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, John. I think the message there is that, 2016 is the year of collaboration. It's the year of making partnerships. It's the year of looking across to the other guy and getting him out of his silo, making deals together, and maybe that's part of our historical transformation now, this year, to touch everyone. It reminds me of what we find at the university in general, is you can't do science without collaborating all over the world. And every scientist you talk to is in touch with, hundreds really of other science. And these fantastic conferences that come to Hawaii, such as the Pacific Telecommunications Conference this week, involving thousands of high-level people who talk to each other and cannot do their work unless they collaborate. And I suggest to you that energy cannot do its work unless we collaborate. So this is a year of collaboration. Why don't we do that? Make a call, give your card, make a deal, make a partnership all over town, okay? Not just the university, but everybody. Okay, a big mahalo to all the speakers today. Please give them all a big round of applause. Thank you all for being here, for being committed to our state of clean energy. And give yourself, I guess you did give yourself a round of applause. To one more for yourself, for everybody, for this briefing, for this whole institution that goes on how many years? Mahalo to the House Sergeant-at-Arms Office, Jiran Oyama, and the staff at Olelo, to David Jones of ThinkTech, who are videotaping this, and to our terrific volunteers and students who made it possible. Now, one of the things, see the Toyota Mirai, it's here, the hydrogen-powered fuel cell vehicle on display near the Father Damien statue. It has a range of over 300 miles and can be recharged in 5 minutes. Yes, 5 minutes. And if you get into the elevator at Bishop Square and tell the people there that you're going to get a hydrogen Mirai, they will all give you a round of gentle applause. Don't forget that the Forum and ThinkTech present a live stream video program called Hawaii, the State of Clean Energy, every Wednesday at 4 p.m., where we hope you will keep current on developments in clean energy. You can watch our live stream on thinktechhawaii.com and YouTube. Final point before you go, and while I'm on it, how about a big plug for energy efficiency? We saved over $12 billion over the past 6 years through Hawaii Energy's incentives and energy savings hints. Check out the Negawatt Moment every Wednesday on thinktechhawaii.com. No matter what we do to achieve 100% clean energy in Hawaii, efficiency is by far the most cost-effective way to reach our energy goals. Every kilowatt hour that we eliminate through efficiency is one less kilowatt hour that we have to make with costly fossil or even renewable energy. So when we begin an energy project with energy efficiency, we know that the rest of the project is going to be easier, faster, cleaner, less expensive. What am I missing? Oh, yeah. Okay, the program evaluation, if you don't mind, would you fill that out and leave it? Okay, it's everyone has one. We hope you'll join in the effort to advance clean energy this session so we can report further success next year, same time, same place, here in the State of Clean Energy. Visit the Forum website. That's hawaiienergypolicy.org for hawaiienergypolicy.hawaii.edu. For updates on our efforts, and contact us if you want to compare notes or make a partnership on your projects and ideas. And we'll see you in the elevator. Okay? Aloha! Happy New Year. Shinyin Kwai Le.
The senior enlisted from all over Korea race out of the Chinook to begin Mungadai. First task is a 2-kilometer ruck to the Rock Ranger obstacle course, where 10-man squads work together to complete 16 obstacles. The course is set up on the side of a mountain, so getting to the next obstacle means a bit of a hike. Each squad member must complete the task before they move on to the next one. The Mungadai competitors strain every muscle in their body as each obstacle brings a different challenge.
25 years old anymore, that's for sure.
Each squad soon realized that teamwork was the only way that they were going to finish.
Sometimes I push them, and sometimes they push me as well, and then we work together. Some of the height, we had a couple members that were afraid of heights, and I'm not really afraid of heights when it comes to the ladders and stuff like that, doing the obstacle course.
The competitors are exhausted and drained, but they have only just begun Mungadai. Army Sergeant Matt Cromer, somewhere, Korea. The famous phrase used to go, "What would you do for a Klondike bar?" Well, at Mungadai, it goes, "What would you do for a Choco Pie?" Late into the second day, the Mungadai competitors have only had 3 hours of sleep and very little food. They just finished a grueling mission and start rucking to their next objective at an undisclosed location. The competitors drop their rucksacks on the ground and notice the mud pit staring back at them.
What constitutes you being put out of the pit is if any part of your body touches the grass.
All 8 squads gather around the pit as they learn that each team will fight for a prize.
Each winning team of their match will earn their squad 7 Choco Pies.
The rules are put out and the teams move up to the mud pit. The squads slowly sit on the edge of the pit and get ready for the command to fight.
Set, go!
Each team attacks, applying the strategy of no holds barred. Teams on the outside watch and wait for their chance in the pit, while others who have finished stand tall in victory, knowing another task in Mungadai is over. The teams are starving and have little energy, but give everything, just in hope for a little bit to eat. Army Sergeant Matt Cromer, somewhere, Korea.
Programs airing on Olelo Community Media's channels are presented by independent producers in the community's interest. The opinions and views expressed do not necessarily represent the views of Olelo Community Media or its management.
We do it island style. From the mountain to the ocean, from the windward to the leeward side.
Thank you so much. Aloha, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm gonna fly through these because I really am most interested in taking your questions, but I did want to give you a little bit of a overview of how marijuana research is conducted in this country and what are some of the barriers to doing this work. So let me just share with you, Brian did a great job of giving you guys some of my background, but let me tell you a little bit more about myself. I've lived in Scottsdale for 30 years, and I practice internal medicine and psychiatry. So basically I do primary care for seriously mentally ill patients, and I do it all over telemedicine. So even while I'm here on the island, I get to see my patients over video conferencing, which has been terrific to be able to stay in touch with my patients and get to be on such a beautiful island. So I have taken care of military veterans now for about 20 years. I started at the Phoenix VA hospital during my residency training was when I first became enchanted with the veterans community, and I love their candor, their honesty, and we developed a really deep fondness for each other, and eventually that it culminated in me, trying to design a study around veterans, looking at new treatments for PTSD, which I'm going to talk to you about. But sadly, I was a faculty member at the U of A Medical School in excellent standing for about a decade until I became the principal investigator on this research, which is the most controversial research at the university, looking at whole plant marijuana for veterans. And that put me at odds with an administration that didn't value this work, that didn't want to see marijuana studied on their campus, that thought it would harm their federal funding. And so we were in conflict for many years over this, and finally we got fired. But the great outcome of that was we ended up getting worldwide media coverage for about a year after that, where all these outlets reporting on the injustice of, and helping us shine a spotlight on the barriers to marijuana research. So I wanted to emphasize that I've never actually used cannabis personally, and that's just a choice that I've made because I want to go into this research without any preconceived notions about how cannabis works. And it's helpful for me to be able to say I'm a lifelong Republican who's never used cannabis. In Arizona, that is extremely valuable. So I hang on to that. But I also, it's good for you to know that I'm not part of the industry, meaning I don't own interest in dispensaries. I don't have financial interest in cultivations or any of that. And I don't even write recommendations for patients. I'm just interested in the science. I focus on the research side. And I'm going to just give you a little glimpse of the trial we're trying to do. So this is basically, we're looking at 76 military veterans with PTSD, and we're going to be using 4 different strains. Oh, I'm sorry. Oops, sorry about that. get that back in. Thank you, hon. Let's see. So we're going to be using, oops. Hold on. That's all right. We'll get this right back in here. So we're going to be using 4 different strains of whole plant marijuana. And, after getting tossed out of the University of Arizona, we ended up with a partnership with Johns Hopkins University. So I'm actually splitting the protocol between the site in Baltimore and my site in Phoenix. And we also have a partnership now with University of Pennsylvania, with UC Denver, and also with my sponsor, MAPS. So that'll give you a good sense of what's happened, So it wasn't, even though the study was very radioactive after getting terminated from the U of A, the fact was that there were some universities around the country that had the courage to partner with us, and so that was a good outcome. So, oh yeah, I just couldn't remember what the next slide was. Let's see. So anyway, I'll just tell you about basically the reason that we're interested in studying PTSD is because we have a serious epidemic of veteran suicide in this country, right? We have 22 veterans each day that are killing themselves here, and we don't have any good treatments for them. We have, one of the things that I'm going to share with you is really, right now, there's only 2 medicines on the market that have been approved for PTSD, just Zoloft and Paxil, that's it. So, if any of you have been on these meds, you know how tough they are to tolerate. They've got a lot of side effects. They've got tons of, drug interactions when, these vets and other PTSD patients end up getting put on tons of different meds, all interacting with each other. So this has been a big frustration. The veterans come home from service and they just want to reintegrate into their community, and they end up getting pummeled with all these prescription meds, and they can't think, they're sedated all the time, they have all this weight gain and sexual dysfunction, and then suddenly they are completely non-functional. They can't even enjoy being part of their family. So
I'm not sure where you want to go.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, thanks, Bri. So this is, after getting tossed out of the university, we ended up with a $2.1 million grant from the Colorado Health Department, which was a big achievement because it was the first government money that we'd ever gotten to actually study the effectiveness of marijuana. It's really unusual that you can find any government money except money to look at harmful side effects of marijuana, what we call safety studies, right? But the good thing was that the Colorado Health Department got allocated about $10 million a couple of years ago to try to study only the effectiveness of marijuana. So they had, and hopefully this will happen in Hawaii too, where you'll see through your medical cannabis program, you'll hopefully start to generate a surplus, and that surplus could be used to promote research like this. So what happened was in Colorado, they generated a $13 million surplus from their medical cannabis program, which they decided to take $10 million and allocate to all of these projects you see here. So everything from studying, does marijuana work to reduce opioid dependence, right? The heroin epidemic and our dependence on pain pills. Does cannabis help with inflammatory bowel, like Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis? So we're going to be studying all these areas, and hopefully in the next 3 years or so, you'll see published data on all of these illnesses. But what I wanted to show you is the reason that we're fighting so hard for our study is because it's the first and only randomized controlled trial in the country looking at whole plant cannabis for PTSD. So it's really important to get this thing, to get some of these questions answered. So what I wanted to talk to you about now is just the history of cannabis in this country, which some of you may know quite a bit about, but I wanted to just highlight a couple things that I think are valuable to remind everybody. So, you know, our nation's formulary was the pharmacopoeia back in the 1800s. This is the way we decided what medicines were good for what illnesses. And in that pharmacopoeia, even in the 1850s, they already identified that marijuana was helpful for things like opioid addiction and for alcoholism and all these things that you see listed. So this is just a partial list, but it was amazing that, you know, people in medicine back then saw that cannabis was helping reduce opioid dependence, that it was useful as substitution therapy for people hooked on pain pills. And so that was pretty fascinating to me. But then on top of that, you know, we got this drug czar, right? They got appointed, and Harry Anslinger ended up, you know, creating reefer madness, which we all know has done, you know, a lot of harm to our drug policies in this country. It seems to color all of the thinking now about marijuana being, you know, a deeply dangerous drug. And so you'll see here that, you know, this is some of the quotes from Harry Anslinger. You know, he made a lot of very racist statements that continue to influence the way drug policy is organized in our country. So, but then this continued when Nixon in 1970, when he signed the Controlled Substances Act. Suddenly we have this situation now where marijuana has been added. You know, we create a scheduling of controlled drugs. And suddenly marijuana is lumped into Schedule 1 with all of these very, very toxic drugs. You know, like if you've ever seen the list of controlled substances, let me just give you a glimpse of it here. So the problem with this list is it's defined by the DEA, right? So we have the Drug Enforcement Agency decides on the medical benefit of controlled substances in this country. How would they know much about that? We're not sure, but this is the wisdom of drug policy here, where the law enforcement professionals have decided that marijuana belongs in Schedule 1 with all these psychedelics and other, you know, much more toxic drugs. Yet Schedule 4, the DEA defines as drugs having very little abuse potential, not addictive. And then you see drugs, you know, like Valium, Ativan, Xanax, drugs that we know have huge street value and are highly addictive. So I think all of us believe that this entire controlled substance schedule needs to be reorganized by people who actually, you know, by medical people who know the properties of these drugs. So, and we all saw when Sanjay Gupta came out in 2013 with this incredible, you know, these really powerful statement about marijuana. This was a huge help to us when he pointed out the fact that, you know, marijuana, he said, I mistakenly believed the DEA when they assured us that marijuana was, you know, incredibly dangerous. He said, I assumed that they really had sound scientific evidence to defend their thinking that it belonged among the most dangerous drugs. And then he goes on to say, but they didn't have the science. They did not, and we have been terribly and systematically misled in this country to believe that, you know, marijuana belongs, it doesn't have medical benefits. So this was really, really powerful and has helped us tremendously to try to, you know, to begin to have a dialogue with electeds about the fact that there is medical value here to this plant. So I became interested in this issue because my veterans started coming to me in my medical practice saying, hey, this plant has been helping me with all of these different symptoms. And I was, you know, hugely skeptical because I'm trained in a really conservative medical model where we don't value anything as medicine unless it's been put through the FDA process. So I just couldn't even fathom what, you know, I thought these guys are just drug seeking, and I was very dismissive. Of course, now I'm very, I regret that very much because these veterans were trying to teach me, and I was not open. I was so blocked by the medical training that teaches us basically that marijuana is a very toxic drug that's highly addictive. So I couldn't get, finally the vets just kept, they felt, because obviously once you've had relief from this plant, you want to tell that story, right? You want to talk to people about it and let the world know. And so these veterans were very fervent and kept, for years trying to open my mind to this. And finally I said, there's got to be something here, because it wasn't just the vets, right? It was all of their family members, all this collateral history from spouses and children. Children were like, I got my dad back. It was so stunning to me. So, and then I became acutely aware of the suicide epidemic among veterans, because in my own practice, I've lost a lot of veterans to suicide. In 20 years, I can't count now. I've lost count on how many vets have killed themselves. But the worst part about this is that we don't even have legit data, right? Like, we talk about 22 a day. That's even, we all know that that's a low estimate, right? Because all of the veterans in my practice who ended their life were all labeled as accidents, right? If you take a prescription drug overdose, the coroner's office will 99% of the time label that an accident. I had a veteran recently who drove his motorcycle into a barricade at 100 miles an hour. He had a suicide note at home, and I knew this patient was actively suicidal, and the coroner's office still labeled it an accident. So you can see what we're up against. This data is not accurate. The coding is almost never accurate. So this number, 22 a day, is actually probably shockingly much higher than that, but it's already a horrific number. And this is the data that our own VA system put out. They published this last year. So we now, have documentation about the fact that, and I'm really curious because, you think about in Canada and in Israel, where veteran community gets not just legal access to marijuana. All the vets get, their monthly supply of cannabis there if they want it. But it's fully subsidized by the government. So I've sat with veterans in clinics in Canada and Israel where they're picking up their allotment of cannabis, and they can pick it up in all different formulations. In Canada, they can pick up to 10 grams per day. So they can get up to 300 grams of cannabis each month. And it's all sponsored by the government. So you wonder, what is it about our government that does not allow the existing science to persuade them? Why is it, are these governments in Canada and Israel just negligent? That they're so reckless that they're allowing their vets to use this? I don't know. So, this is what is really, it's really tears me up all the time, is that when we look at the prescription drug overdose problem in this country, and then we look at the fact that we only have these 2 meds available to treat PTSD, and on top of that, the other meds that I have to use are so disappointing. This is a presentation that I gave at Walter Reed Hospital recently, so it's important for you guys to know that the biggest military hospital in the country, Walter Reed, invited us to come and present 2.5 hours of marijuana content to their military doctors. And what I was trying to show them was, look, when Zoloft and Paxil fail, this is what I'm allowed to do. As a psychiatrist, for instance, I can utilize all of these medicines. On these lists, you see all of these antidepressants from all classes. All of these sleep meds, just piles and piles of prescriptions that I'm allowed to give. None of these medications have ever been tested for PTSD, but I'm allowed to use them. So that's why you can see how quickly all of these mood stabilizers, that we use for bipolar disorder, all of the benzodiazepines, all of the antipsychotics are fair game for me to utilize. So you can see why our veterans community becomes so demoralized. They come back and we can't find a way to fix them, so we just keep pummeling them with all of these prescription meds and none of them really do much, right? But then you look at a plant and you say, this plant is so complex. You know, this plant, this is what I wanted to point out. Veteran community has a 33% higher rate of prescription drug overdose. So this is incredibly depressing. Part of that is because of us in the medical community. We're the ones who give the veterans these pills, and they use that as a weapon against themselves eventually. So this was a big breakthrough last year. Remember, if you guys saw this JAMA article came out, and very mainstream medical journal, talking about the fact that in the 23 medical marijuana states, so in all these states that have legal cannabis available, that there is a 25% lower opioid overdose death rate there. And if you dig deeper into that article, you'll see that each year that these states had a comprehensive medical cannabis law, like what you're about to implement, you know, what Hawaii's soon to implement here in the next year, you see that the opioid overdose death rate continues to diminish year after year. So each year the program takes hold and more patients learn about cannabis as a potential treatment for pain and for anxiety and all these other things that actually anxiety is not a treatable condition here, but if you think about 9 different qualifying conditions here in Hawaii, right? So you're going to have patients and caregivers and physicians who are going to be able to finally utilize this plant to treat all these myriad of conditions. So let me talk with you. This is a great illustration that one of my patients put together, and I love to use this because I think it's so accurate portrayal of what our veterans are drowning in pills and pill bottles, and they end up discovering cannabis. You know, here in this case, he discovers a rolled cigarette. But this is, you know, the reality is that, you know, veterans are finding cannabis life-saving, and we need to understand why. We need to understand what strains are best for what illnesses, and how we can finally help curb this epidemic of veteran suicide. So I think what I'd like to do is leave you guys on this picture because I think this is so powerful, and I want to now be able to take your questions and have more of an interactive dialogue. So if anybody has questions, just throw your hands up and let's see if anybody has it. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm interested specifically in the biological mechanism. I have a family member who has HER2-positive metastatic breast cancer.
Yeah.
And she's gone through all the radiation, chemotherapy, surgery, and now she's at a place of maybe being able to look at a protocol like the Rick Simpson protocol.
Yeah.
And I guess one question I have for you is, how do you negotiate all the information that you do find, depending on where you go regionally or looking on the internet? I've talked to so many people on the phone who work in dispensaries, and there doesn't seem to be a consistent body of knowledge.
Can you summarize and repeat that?
Yeah, sure. So he was asking about, you know, in terms of breast cancer, for instance, where do you access a legitimate body of knowledge about, you know, where do you get guidance for how to use cannabis for, in this case, for someone who's already been through treatment and wants to examine, so a high THC oil is what when he talks about Rick Simpson oil, right? That's a very important breakthrough that this gentleman, Rick Simpson, really an inventor of one of the most interesting you know, oils that seems to have, you know, magnificent anti-cancer property, but again, has never been formally tested. So all of this is anecdotal experience that Rick Simpson has collected over decades now of making this. So I've traveled a lot outside of the U.S. trying to talk to patients about their experiences with cannabis, and many of them have had some really transformative experiences using Rick Simpson oil. And the good thing is, eventually it's not going to be called that anymore, right? It's going to be, you're going to have access to high THC oil here on this island through this dispensary model. So you'll be able to to get this. But in terms of being able to find a real body of research that would guide you on how to use it, this is going to be the challenge, right? It's really what we're looking at here on this island and in any medical marijuana state is a process of self-exploration for patients. Patients are going to have to go through a process of trial and error where they're going to have to, and hopefully no errors, but the truth is that that's the way medicine is in general. You know, the fact is most of the prescriptions I give to patients, half of them don't work during the first trial or the second trial, and so it takes time to go on sort of an odyssey and find that right thing. But Right. So Brian just pointing out that, in his case, he's made a commitment to provide consultation with medical professionals on site. So what they're going to be available to you guys to, whether it's a nurse or a pharmacist or somebody who is going to be able to talk with you about the medical properties of each of these different formulations, whether it's vaporizing or tinctures, and talk with you and hope to guide you through that process so it's not just such a confusing, confusing morass of different information. But it's going to be tough. I mean, there's no question that because the government, we didn't even talk about yet all the ways that the government has blocked this research. But the good news is that Brian is making a commitment to collect data from people here on the ground. So on the island here, you're going to have live data collection. As patients come in, they utilize a strain. We're going to be able to document their response to various strains, and then to be able to look at that in total and publish that so that people can see how various strains are working for illnesses. So that's going to be really important. Yeah, anybody else over here? Yeah, go ahead.
So the legislature is looking at a bill to authorize the University School of Medicine, Cancer Center, and UH Hilo Pharmacy School to do research and conduct medical trials. Is there anything specific the legislature should do and/or the state university should do to encourage medical research from your experience?
Good question. Yeah, so she's asking about how, what can the state do, because obviously the research is unfortunately being blocked a lot, mostly at the federal level. But there are problems at the state level that are really, as you can see just by the way the University of Arizona reacted to this, there is a pervasive fear among all state universities that doing cannabis research on campus will harm their ability to draw down federal dollars, that they won't be able to get federal grants. So you're going to see the same problem here, even in states like Colorado and Washington that have both medical and recreational. Still, those state universities are terrified of conducting even legitimate marijuana research, like FDA-approved research. They won't do it because they think it's going to harm their federal money. So you do have an opportunity here, because if your universities adopt a more progressive approach here, then you could become, this island or this state could become the mecca for marijuana research, because because all other universities are running from it. If University of Hawaii actually embraces it and is proactive about saying, we want this here, we want to be a home for marijuana research, and if you create a sanctuary for this work, then you could become the new, you could be at the forefront of the most important marijuana research happening in the country. And I think that that's a really good goal, and I know that Brian is committed to doing that. He's committed to taking a portion of the proceeds from the cannabis sales and plowing that back into research. Research is so expensive. I mean, our project, as you can see, the total project cost of a randomized controlled trial is $2.5 million. That's typical of any kind of randomized controlled trial. So that's why you can see, and there isn't government money available except that little bit of money in Colorado, and that's all been allocated. So now the question is, will your state, first of all, there's two things that the state legislature can do to create a conducive environment for cannabis research. One is they can make sure that surplus money from the medical cannabis program would be allocated toward research, that you would maybe create a scientific advisory commission here for the state that would kind of adjudicate proposals that come from your scientists here locally and be able to allocate money to that. Because right now, every state has a kind of a biomedical research commission where they take state dollars and they put it into different. The problem is that none of those commissions are willing to fund marijuana research. They fund everything else. They'll fund Alzheimer's, they'll fund cancer research, they'll do all that, but they won't come near marijuana research. So if your state is willing to do that and allocate, all you have to do is say, we want 10% per year of the surplus from your medical cannabis program to go into cannabis research through the Biomedical Research Commission here. That would be a big step. Then, if the universities would take the step to send out a letter to all of their faculty, different than what in other universities, the presidents have sent out letters saying, we are not conducting marijuana research ever. Even, this happened at University of Colorado. The president sent out a notice to all the faculty saying you will not do cannabis research on our campus.
Similar thing at the University of Hawaii.
Oh, they did do that, yeah. So that's the thing, is if you can persuade the university president here to change his attitude on that and instead, adopt a really proactive approach, and maybe it's going to take, people, for instance, in this room, if you can somehow influence the university administration, or if you have a board of regents here or something that you can go and testify and tell them about how you think that this is crucial. I mean, here you are, you guys are rolling out a really progressive medical cannabis law. This is probably, when I looked at this law, the letter of this law, I said, this has the potential to be the best medical cannabis state in the nation, because it's got a broad list of qualifying conditions. You allow for all different formulations of the plant. It's a really wonderful, it's a great opportunity to do research and to collect objective data on how patients are responding to this. So if you could go and talk to the legislators and to the Board of Regents and tell them that we don't want to miss this opportunity. Right now you're going to start seeing, many new, that you've got, what did we say, 15,000 patients on the, 13,000 on the registry now, and hopefully you're going to see that double and triple over the next year. So you've got a great chance to start collecting data from all of these people who can openly talk about their use of cannabis now. They don't have to live in the shadows anymore. They can talk in detail about how they're reacting to this plant, the good and the bad, right? We want to know everything about the plant. So that is the purpose of a university, in my opinion, right? Universities used to be the sanctuary of that kind of work. They used to take pride in finding a home for that kind of research when they knew, controversial research that couldn't be done anywhere else. But instead now we see all the universities running scared from it. So whatever we can do, and we will help you with that. Certainly, I know Brian has relationships with lawmakers and university officials, and we intend to do whatever we can to try to build to forge partnerships with the universities here. But we need you guys too. We need the public to continue to put pressure on them, because otherwise it's just us, begging. So, yeah.
I've got a question.
Sure.
Have you ever heard of anything called CDR Med by Zelva's Frontier?
Yeah, I've heard of it online, but I don't know much about it. Do you know what it is? Can you talk about it?
They had a presentation they did at the Cannabis Expo.
Ah, okay.
Now, what it looks to be is like, you guys have seen the physician's desk reference, right? The big red book that all the physicians. Well, what they're doing is they've automated this process basically for that reference, but using cannabis as the treatment, and all they're right now they're working out in California. I know they have patients there where they're taking these patients. Like I walk in, they say, okay, you've got MS, you've got diabetes, you've got IBS, you've got all these things, and they take using street names at this time.
Okay.
And they will match patients and dosages and start you out you know, they actually then have a baseline, someplace to start with.
I see.
And then work it. And it's called CDR Med. And by, like I said, and Zeldis, you might have heard of it. This is Zeldis Frontier, so I think it's an option of that.
Wow.
It's basically how you'll collect the information. Is what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about a.
Is it an app?
Automated.
Okay.
They've already got. They have patients in there already.
Okay.
And so I mean, I've only seen the one presentation myself.
Yeah.
But it's an absolute solution.
Yes.
To collecting in a logical, analytical fashion. Profiling your patients, being able to say, okay, let's start with this dosage. And when you start, that doesn't mean that's going to work. You know, cannabis is like all medications. You try this one, this
right. You got it.
You might have to try this regimen. Maybe you don't smoke it. You got to have a tincture. You got to have a capsule with something in it. But this, I think this is a great, I would like Manoa Botanical Gardens to also look at it and see about the potential of using, why reinvent the wheel?
Yeah,
if you go to the university and say, look, here's people, here's a methodology, here's something that's actually in use somewhere.
Right. I love that idea. I think that she brings up a really important point that, we're going to see all kinds of innovation like that happening as we see, prohibition finally lifting on medical cannabis. We're going to see the opportunities like that to create apps and all kinds of new software that will allow us to collect data. But what's even more crucial is being able to collect data on lab-tested cannabis, right? And that's what the law here is going to allow you guys to finally have, to allow our patients here on the island to have lab-tested cannabis that we can then correlate to. Instead of saying sour diesel helped my, my agitation of my whatever, that then we will be able to actually say, this ratio of THC to CBD to CBN was able to benefit my illness. So
if you use something like this, you can get away from street names eventually.
That's right.
Then you can work with more genetic profiling and terpene.
That's right.
So our plan is to try to avoid using street names in our dispensary if we're awarded a license. I have a question. I meant to ask this at the beginning. Who here currently has a 329 card?
Is that a blue card now?
Has a blue card?
It's white.
It's white. It used to be blue, now it's white. Okay, so we have a handful. Who here are caregivers?
Oh, good, you guys.
All right, fantastic.
Good.
Who's here that this is the first time they've ever been in any kind of medical marijuana presentation? Wow. So we have a really good representation. Who here is a physician or a medical professional?
Good, you guys.
Physician, nurse, someone. Who here is currently certifying patients of those in the medical community? One. It's part of the problem. It's one of the problems that we're trying to solve. It's one of the reasons why, back here, one of the reasons why we brought Dr. Sisley out to help educate the medical community so we can get more physicians and potentially APRNs if that legislation passes. Go Bella. There's a couple questions. The first one here and then the second one there. Go ahead.
Thank you. Is there any reason, I understand that universities could put their federal funds in jeopardy, and I understand that because that's how the game goes.
Sure.
Is there any reason why a private laboratory could not provide and conduct and be an armature for this type of research?
There's no reason why you couldn't. Yeah, she was asking, she understands why universities certainly are fearful of doing this work, but why is it that a private lab couldn't do it? And truth is that there's nothing preventing a private lab from creating a randomized controlled trial and implementing it. The big obstruction right now is money, because it's so costly to do these studies. And of course the study drug, because for our study, we have to buy marijuana from the federal government. So I can't buy marijuana from Brian or any other license of eventual license holder here, because we are not allowed. This is not a federally legal supply of cannabis here in Hawaii or in Arizona or anywhere. So the only legal supply is at University of Mississippi, and many of you have seen the grow out there. It's pretty depressing. They only have a few strains available. They don't have the strains that investigators are requesting. They don't have it available in a timely way. We had to wait 20 months for our marijuana. Now we're waiting on the DEA to approve the protocol after we've already been approved by the FDA, 4 different IRBs, and the Public Health Service. Now we have to wait for the DEA, which is, so just so you guys have a sense of what the timeline is to do marijuana research in the country, we submitted the study design to the FDA back in 2010. We got approval from the FDA about 5 months later. So we had approval in April 2011 from the FDA, and here we are 5 years later, still have not enrolled our first veteran in the study. So this is incredibly shocking to me that our government, when we have an epidemic of veteran suicide and we have vets suffering so profoundly from PTSD, that you would think the government would expedite research like that. And instead, they have stonewalled this at every turn, and we still don't have any timeline for when this study will finally get started. And it's just I think all of us should be concerned about this as taxpayers, that we are seeing massive amounts of taxpayer dollars going into safety studies on marijuana, looking at harmful side effects and addiction potential. Where is the funding to look at efficacy? Why is it that we keep plowing all this money into the DEA to help to continue to impede this work? So one of the things that I was going to talk to you about, but I didn't want to, bore you with all this, but if there's one call to action that I have for you today, it's to help us end this DEA monopoly, because it is outrageous that I have to buy really substandard, thank you guys. I appreciate that, because, to have to buy substandard cannabis from the DEA through University of Mississippi is just it's one of the final barriers to marijuana research. Once we end the DEA monopoly, so that I would be allowed to buy cannabis from any expert grower in the country. This is it. So the DEA, we call this the NIDA monopoly. So the DEA has licensed this facility in Mississippi since 1968. NIDA has a government-enforced monopoly on the only federally legal supply of cannabis for studies like this. So the only studies I can do here in Hawaii using Hawaii-based cannabis are observational studies, which we know, in medicine don't have the influence on our colleagues. The medical profession wants to see randomized controlled trials, and you can't do that on state-level marijuana. You can only do that with federal government cannabis. So this is a really big problem, and you can see the pictures here. This is the cannabis on the left that Mississippi sells me. It's it's one of my colleagues dumped out the content, so you can see how this is so a lot of people in medicine would argue that this sabotages the study from the beginning, right? And you're forced to use this when really that's what we want to use, right? It's just the flowering part of the plant, where we know has the maximal therapeutic benefit. So this is one of the things that we're hoping if we all focus on ending this DEA monopoly so that we can finally license other expert growers in the country, that would be a really important effort. I'm sorry. Oh, okay, you first, huh?
Okay. When dealing with veterans, what I've found one of the biggest preclusions from them taking on cannabis therapy to start with is fear that they're going to lose their benefits from the VA.
Yeah, right.
So if you could say something to those vets, what would you want to tell them regarding that? Because that seems to be, truthfully, it is the single most effective thing that I've ever experienced, period.
Is that right?
And it's very difficult to deal with the fear that you might potentially lose your only source of income.
That's true.
or something.
That's true.
The same way you lose an honorable discharge.
Yes. Yeah.
She's a veteran who was on a whole lot of
wow.
meds.
Oh, this is.
Can I say something about that?
Yeah. Yeah. Let me. Yeah.
The benefits can be reviewed. When they're reviewed, you get benefits based on certain criteria. If you're cured from whatever, you don't have the same presenting medical problem that you begin with, so you should lose your benefit and you should go out and get work.
That's not quite what they're having experience with. They're being denied medication because they're using cannabis, and they're classifying it as a drug-seeking behavior.
So the VA has come up with an opinion that in states that are legal, they're not going to. They used to say if you come to the pain clinic and you want to use marijuana, that you just show you're a druggie, so we're not going to take you to the pain clinic. They've come up with a ruling that says where it's legal, they're going to ignore that and take you anyway they want.
I have a copy of that paper.
Yeah, you know what she. Yeah, I know what you guys are doing. There's a VA directive called the 2011-004 that talks about, it's supposed to be a protection for vets. Her question was, what do we do with, how do we reassure veterans that if they choose to get a medical card, how do we protect them from losing their, first of all, their financial benefits, but also their ability to access other treatment at the VA. And this has been a real problem. She highlights a really critical issue, is that a lot of vets around the country have been terminated from their pain programs. They are not allowed to have access to opioids if they have a positive urine drug screen for THC. And it is a huge, huge concern for them, because a lot of vets have successfully learned to use some opioids and some cannabis, and have been able to cut down dramatically the amount of pain pills they're on by using cannabis adjunctively like that. So we want to be able to protect, to create an environment where veterans are protected. But sadly, this VA directive, even though it's called a directive because every VA hospital is required to adhere to this. And the directive says you are not allowed to fire a veteran who is in a legal medical cannabis state and has a medical card. So, but what happens is that when there's a saying that if you know one VA, then what is it? You've met one VA, then you've met one VA. It's not like one VA doesn't represent all the VAs. Every VA is completely different, how they treat their vets, how progressive their thinking is. And so there are certain VAs around the country that have completely ignored this directive and will fire the veterans for one urine drug screen that's positive. They end up terminating them, cutting them off all the meds, not just pain pills, but benzos, any controlled substances. So that can be really, that's right, yeah. So it can be really, really harmful. And you're pointing out something that's essential, that hopefully here on this island and all the islands in Hawaii, hopefully we can persuade the VAs to adopt a compassionate approach that fully acknowledges the law here in the state, and that encourages the VA to at least all right.
I think we had a question here.
Yeah.
I just want to say how wonderful it is to hear you. I'm a psychiatrist 2 blocks away in private practice.
Wow.
I was about to talk last night.
Oh, good. Thank you for coming.
I want to hear what you have to say about stimulants and what you've heard about Ritalin and Adderall abuse during deployment.
Yeah. It's interesting you bring that, because I don't have, he's asking about the stimulant effects in the veteran population specifically, or just in general? But stimulant effects and how it interacts with cannabis. Is that what? Okay, so this is a really interesting, because one of the things that we see, especially in the veteran population, is that we do use an excessive amount of stimulants with vets, because usually we're trying to overcome all the bad side effects of these other psychotropic meds, right? So when these psych meds end up making them sedated and totally obtunded, we try to give them stimulants to try to jack them up again, and it's been really frustrating for them. But it's interesting that you bring up that there's a potential therapeutic synergy. Is that what you're saying? That stimulants may have potential good interaction between stimulants and cannabis? Is that the question, or?
I view PTSD as a hyperadrenergic problem.
Yeah.
And Adderall and Wellbutrin, which is a ketoamphetamine, it's not well known that it's an amphetamine, Wellbutrin. I see it as worsening PTSD, so I get that's off of Wellbutrin as often as I can.
Good.
And so the relationship of explaining to them you need less adrenaline in your body.
Right.
And I don't know how to say from a research base, what can I say in terms of marijuana will lower your adrenaline?
Right.
I went take it offline because
I see what you're saying. Yeah, I see. He said, you know what? I'm gonna talk to you more about that after, because there isn't any data right now for sure. That's one of the problems we have, is we don't have any good answers on how cannabis we don't even have answers on how it treats PTSD, much less how it could, work to help people reduce their stimulants and things like that. We have some, initial survey data that suggests that patients are coming off opioids, stimulants, benzos, using cannabis. But I want to talk to you about that more. So let me come back to you on that. We'll get to
Your association affiliation with Johns Hopkins, you had mentioned earlier. Are you familiar with Dr. Remington Nevin, one of the leading advocates in the nation in the war against mefloquine and Lariam, the anti-malarial drug that is prescribed to veterans for decades, and has disastrous effects on the neurological system of many people.
Yes. Yeah. I am not aware of it. I mean, I'm not aware of the
same type of effects that severe PTSD symptoms and aspirated symptoms of the laundry list that displayed.
I have not, and I don't know that researcher that you mentioned either, but I'd like to hear more about it. If you have that info, I'd love to get that from you. Yeah, let's do that. Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up. Yeah. Anyway, yeah.
I have a severe arthritis condition, very painful.
Yes, sir.
Managing it with corticosteroids, but when it doesn't work, extremely painful, and I'm allergic to all aspirin-related products. Leave me with just the narcotics.
Yeah.
And I don't really want to take those.
Yeah.
How effective and how dangerous is it to take these for marijuana or pain management?
Yeah, well, it's certainly, if you compare opioids to cannabis, the toxicity of opioids is obviously considerably more damaging. So I would say, typically what we talk to patients about is that cannabis, the toxicity is really low. It has a very mild side effect profile that is real, and in terms of, for instance, addiction potential from cannabis versus opioids, I would say that generally cannabis is not much more addictive than a cup of coffee. If you look at the addiction rate of caffeine versus cannabis, they're very similar. It's about 9 to 10%. So I would say it is certainly worth it, just because of what you're describing, where you're not able to take aspirin-related products and you're stuck on opioids. I would definitely say that folks like you are a great candidate to explore cannabis as a adjunctive treatment, as a kind of supplementary.
How effective is it at managing pain?
That's right. He's asking, how effective is it at managing pain? That's the problem. Is some patients get extraordinary pain control and some don't. So each patient has to be, that's why it's so important what Brian was describing, the consultation, where you are able to talk to someone at a dispensary and kind of go through this process of figuring out, because for instance, there are certain strains of cannabis that might work and other strains that don't. Remember, we talk about marijuana as if it's one plant, but there's hundreds of phenotypes of this plant, and all of them have different clinical properties. So we don't know, we won't know when you first come in what strain is going to be best for managing your pain. We're going to try one that we think is best, that has worked best for other people with pain, but it may not be the first one you try that works. So that's why it's the old adage of start low, go slow, you know, try a little bit of one strain, see how it works. But you would be a great candidate to explore this, because if there's any way that we could help you, you know, cut down your opioid dependence, we'd certainly love to explore that with you. So, yeah.
I have a question about you guys' current topic. Are you guys doing research and studies on specific cannabis, different CBD profiles, and like you said, arthritis versus PTSD or back pain?
Right. Yeah. Well, that's what we hope to do. So Brian said that he's going to be hoping to cultivate over 10 different strains, and within his first year of being operational. And what that will allow then is for you to experiment with these different strains. And look, in our study, we're going to be looking. Oh, here you can see we have 4 different phenotypes of marijuana that we're examining. So we have a placebo control, we have a high THC arm, we have a high CBD arm, and then we have a 1-to-1 ratio of CBD to THC. And yeah, it's a way back. That's okay, don't worry. But basically, you know, those are the kind of studies that will help us start to pinpoint what strains are best for what illnesses. But as you can see with our study, you know, the fact that the study's been blocked for 6 years doesn't bode well for waiting for the government to green light studies is going to be really hard. So what's more important and what's going to get you immediate data here on the island is letting people start, you know, getting their cards, purchasing cannabis through a dispensary, lab-tested cannabis, so we can start to understand how, you know, patients here are responding to various strains.
I work in industry, and if you would come to me and says, hey, I have arthritis, a lot of people are being turned off because they're given the wrong type of medicine. You're given the strongest amount, whatever, this is his first time trying it. You give him the strongest push available, he's going to sleep, he doesn't get anything.
That's right. That is a huge problem that I see, especially in the veterans community. I see tons of vets who experimented with cannabis as a young person, or even, you know, as an adult. They end up having one bad experience with it because they bought something on the black market that's not lab tested. They end up using too much. So that's why this, you know, you guys have such a golden opportunity here. You're creating a regulated market where patients are finally going to have access to a sensible approach of how they can access, you know, lab tested, purified cannabis that will enable them to start this odyssey, you know, of experiencing different strains and seeing what works for them. But yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So just one other thing I'd like to add is one of the things that we're hopeful to do is we have a relationship with the Hawaii Agricultural Research Center, which is the state's only private agricultural research and breeding organization, the only one in the state. And we've developed a research plan that integrates agricultural breeding with observational studies to identify which strains are having the best therapeutic benefits. These are Hawaii strains from that are local, and then providing that data to HARC, Hawaii Agricultural Research Center, which we have over a half dozen agriculture PhDs available to us to analyze those strains, understand the CBD, THC profiles, and try to figure out what is the commonality and start breeding towards that for specific therapeutic benefits. So this is one of the things that we're hoping to do. And the start is having, you know, a really strong scientist, physician like Dr. Sisley to get it started.
I was going to show you guys what we've done here. So when patients are randomized in one of those 4 arms of the study, they have to go through this safety session, right, where we expose them to the cannabis for 4 hours. We have to monitor them to pick up exactly what you're describing. What we expect, you know, the expected adverse events from cannabis, even at low dosages, they might have a panic attack, they might have a psychotic episode, like, you know, feeling paranoid, but those are really rare, right? In truth, under 1% of new users of cannabis get that kind of episode. But the problem is that when they get it, it's so profound that they never want to touch it again. It's just like what you were saying earlier, that nobody wants to come back to it after. So we want to try to prevent that, but we don't know how. I don't think we're ever going to be able to figure out. One of the things that I try to do, especially if I have a vet that I know is vulnerable to that, you know, if they already have a history of psychotic episodes or anxiety, I usually will opt for a high CBD strain. So phenotypes are strains of cannabis that are rich in CBD. We hope that they will be able to buffer some of the bad side effects of the THC, but we don't know that for sure, but that's the theory. So we try to, usually if you opt for a CBD-rich strain, you're going to end up avoiding some of that, but it's a great point. Someday we'll be able to predict that.
That's a really interesting point about the buffering.
Yeah. To talk about, so that's one of the things that a lot of people have thought is that CBD, you know, we talk about how complex this plant is, right? It's got 138 phytocannabinoids. We were just talking about that yesterday, that NIDA just uncovered the 138th phytocannabinoids. We always talk about THC and CBD, but we got CBN, we got CBG, we got all these, you know, 130 plus other phytocannabinoids, so they all work together synergistically to create what we now call this entourage effect, right? The entourage effect is symbolized really well by the interaction between THC and CBD. The fact that the negative side effects of THC that the doctor was mentioning, the psychosis and the anxiety that are rare, but they do happen, are believed to be caused by strains that are high in THC, like over 20% THC. So when patients get strains that have a lower THC or maybe a 1-to-1 ratio of THC to CBD, the CBD seems to kind of buffer the bad side effects of the THC. So that's how the entourage effects work. The entourage effect works by having all of these molecules working together synergistically, and that's what the gentleman in the back who mentioned pharma, that's one of the challenges we have, is that pharma is focused squarely on isolating a cannabinoid so that they can patent it and put it into pill form and make a lot of money, and that's why it's so essential that we preserve a regulated market, a legal market for whole plant marijuana, right? Because whole plant is where we believe the real efficacy lies. And that's why, you know, pharma has not been able to reproduce the efficacy of the natural plant. And all these, what we've had 30 years now of, you know, fully clarifying that there's an endocannabinoid system. And so pharma has known about this, and they've poured tons of money into trying to replicate the natural plant, but they haven't been able to. So, yeah.
I don't know if this is much a question. I wanted to maybe make a suggestion as far as with these symptoms. You're talking about the anxiety and the paranoia kicking in sometimes.
Yeah.
From anecdotally, what I've experienced is that generally that happens. I think it's a PTSD reaction. They're by themselves, and that's what brings it on in the first place. You get put out of the military, and you're not we anymore. Your eye, and eye is the most dangerous place to be in the military. And I think maybe it just exacerbates that feeling. Have you guys ever tried doing, like, give them a battle buddy? Yeah, give them a group. Have you ever given them a battle buddy to smoke with? Because I smoke with, when I introduce people to cannabis therapy, I smoke with them and I help them understand. They're not afraid because they're not sitting there by themselves going, what is this thing going to do to me? Oh my God. They have somebody being like, oh, I can tell this is starting to relax you. I can tell you're starting to feel like this. What is it doing for you? And they talk to me about what they're feeling. They don't necessarily. Have you ever thought about trying that?
That's so crucial. I mean, she's raising a really important issue that I'm hoping folks like Brian, other people, and if anybody here is applying for a license in this, you know, regulated market, I hope that you all hear that, because what we need from, you know, license holders on this island, on all the islands, is to take that seriously, that we need unique outreach with the veteran community that enables them to create opportunities like that. Like, that's why groups like, you probably heard Weed for Warriors and Grow for, all these different groups are are surfacing to try to help vets and do exactly what you're describing, where they create chances for veterans to teach each other how to use the plant. It's better for them to learn from a peer mentor than from me. They don't need to hear it come on down from high from the doctor. They need to hear from each other who've experienced this. I mean, why would a vet trust me to tell them how to use cannabis when I've never even used it personally? Whereas you, who have firsthand experience, are going to be an incredible guidepost for them. So I think that should be taken really seriously, that we need to create environments, and I'm hoping all the license holders will, create veteran support groups and meetings where you guys can get together and talk with each other about that. Yeah.
One of the things that we did is the dispensary location that we've secured here in Mo'iliili has an entire upstairs that we're, besides having our corporate offices there, rooms for educational and other types of seminars. Can't do any smoking on site, it's against the statute, so that would have to be done elsewhere. But that's something that we've thought about, to have sort of on-site educational seminars. Another question? Oh, organic.
Yeah. What do you think?
Organic is a term of art. It's a federal label, and so you can't legally, in my view, use organic as a label for cannabis. There are organic-like methods that you can use that we have a goal to use. But until that is clarified, to describe cannabis as organic, I think is misleading. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So from a pest, of course, I mean, this is medicine. It's not just a crop. And I think it was really well addressed in one of the recent committee hearings. This notion that you could grow medicine outdoors is just crazy. It has to be grown indoors, at least in my view. In order to, and when you do that, when you control the environment and you do a really good job of controlling the environment, that should reduce or eliminate the need for any kind of chemicals, or at least substances that, well, everything's chemical, substances that are not natural. So our goal is to only use natural substances for keeping the plants healthy. That was a question about sort of course, we don't want to use pesticides.
Yeah.
There was a question in the back? No?
Yeah.
Right here.
How many dispensaries are open in the state again?
There'll be 3 licenses granted in Oahu, and each license can have 2 dispensaries.
Question, because of the stigma, the gentleman in the back, he kind of nailed it. Is there a concern that there won't be enough licensed physicians that can approve a cannabis card for a patient? There just won't be enough.
So the question is what if there's not enough physicians that are willing to certify patients?
There ain't many right now.
Yeah, we're aware of that.
So am I.
And this is why we brought Dr. Sisley out. I mean, it's non-trivial expense bringing her out here and conducting a series of sessions.
Oh, yeah, I love that.
We've had over 20 physicians and nurses in each session over the last couple of days. And our plan is to, of course, if we're granted a license, to do this on a regular basis, because conducting education and outreach to the medical community is just as important to the general community, because if we don't have physicians, and I'm going to turn this over to Wendy because she's really the person that should be answering this question.
Yeah.
Come on over here, Wendy.
And
I was just hoping you would mention the bill that's in motion.
I was going to say the bill,
There is a bill in motion right now that you could lend support to. And it's so that advanced practice nurse practitioners will be given the privilege of making the recommendations, and that would help us greatly.
Yeah.
So,
and you mentioned,
I think it's House Bill 2707. Is that it?
Yeah. And also the educational materials. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, the Medical Cannabis Coalition provides
education for physicians and for patients. And the Drug Policy Forum produces a guidebook for physicians who want to make the recommendations. So we try to get that into the hands of all the physicians on the island so that they'll understand what the law is and feel more comfortable with maybe making the recommendations. So I have a bunch of materials back here you can help yourself to access that guidebook if you'd like to see it. It's outdated now because we got the dispensary bill passed and we got the program changed over to the Department of Health, and there's been other changes and we're waiting to see what whether or not some of the bills are going to pass to include those as well. So, but in the meantime, you can look at the old version online, or if you contact me, I've created an educational program for other healthcare professionals, and I'm happy to come to wherever you are if you can provide me with a venue to present a PowerPoint presentation. I'm happy to try to educate other healthcare professionals. So please do help yourself to the materials back there and contact me for more information.
Thank you so much, Wendy. So we promised Moilele Community Center that when we wrap up, we gotta leave it in the room in the condition we found it. So we have to be out of here by 4. So we want to respect everybody's time. So we have about 10 more minutes, and then we're gonna wrap up. So are there any more questions for Dr. Sisley, myself, Wendy? I don't know if Chris Guy from the Hawaii Dispensary Alliance is here anymore. Question?
I would just like to encourage everybody who hasn't seen the 2016 Cannabis Health Summit, all the live videos that all doctors spoke about, you can check it out on YouTube.
There you go.
And especially like Dr. Dustin Sulak, I believe his name was, who talked about how if you're smoking the same medicine, perhaps you can have a cannabis cap even with that same medicine, so really be aware of that. And so if anybody wants to check out the Health Cannabis Summit.
Health Cannabis Summit 2016.
Very good.
Thank you. Any other questions? Going once?
You mentioned earlier, I just want some clarification on non-edibles, and I know since we switch over to the Department of Health, they don't condone smoking, so what?
So the flour will be can be flour and oils. The smokable materials can be sold. Our understanding of the rules are that the smokable materials can be sold, such as oils and not oils can't be smoked; they can be vaporized, and the flour can be sold, but no. Concentrates and flours and oils are all allowed, but the legal term, I don't like using it, no paraphernalia, so no vaping pens or any other materials, equipment that can be used to smoke or vaporize can be sold in the dispensary. My response is to support the legislation that's currently being heard. HB 2707 just got scheduled for the Finance Committee, I believe this week or next week. You can submit legislation. I don't think verbal testimony will be taken. And then it should hopefully, not would, cross over to the Senate, and you'll have additional opportunities to provide testimony. That's the solution. It's not going to happen in this room. Any other questions? Yes.
I want to kind of go back to my original question, what I heard you say in terms of accessing information. What I think I heard you say was the hard science research is yet to be done.
Yes.
And if you're trying to figure out what you're doing, that you're kind of on your own.
Well, on your own with consultation from these facilities now. That's what we hope, is that you're going to find that the medical people who are available on site here are going to have at least they're trained in the medical model, and many of them will be experienced in cannabis and how to, so hopefully they'll be able to guide you. It's not going to be complete blindly,
in terms of self-education, where do you go for those credible sources of information?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a few different sources. For medical, I usually go to, if you guys have seen Americans for Safe Access, they have a really good website where they've compiled all the the peer-reviewed research articles under each different condition. So you guys can, they've done a good job of compiling that. On the website is, I believe, safeaccessnow.org. And so that's a good place to start. And then, of course, do you know of any other one?
There's one called the Granny Storm Pro.
Yes, that's right.
That thing's like 800 pages long.
Yes.
It's the Granny Storm Pro.
Granny Storm Crow, she said.
Subdivides them by conditions. You can actually go to your condition and you see like a whole list of just clickable links. You go to different trials and actually find it by condition.
That's right. Yeah, if you Google Granny Storm Crow, and it's not all peer-reviewed articles, but it's still an incredible resource. I can't believe somebody did that.
I don't know where
anybody else? I know, right?
All right, go ahead.
Marijuana is bad. Very few people have tried it for illness that you're considering. But once dispensaries start opening up, you can start getting in there, trying the product, and find something that works. You can talk to people while you're in there.
Yeah.
What are you using it for?
Exactly.
That's the way you're going to have a...
It's a good point.
It's sharing with each other.
Yeah, another benefit. Anybody else, or we should let you guys enjoy the rest of your weekend? Should we do that? All right. You guys, thank you so much. Thank you all very much.
Get the milk in there so far. Got this powder, got some powder, got some...
So how has it been going? Because we haven't seen each other over the weekend because we just hang out during the week.
A couple of people have said they see my face they see my face.
Oh, well, that's good. Now, how has it been going? You've been doing your 2 shakes a day.
Yeah, one day I only had one because I wasn't hungry at all.
Oh, that's actually good, right?
I was too, my stomach's shrinking, so...
Good. How about energy level? Is your energy?
It's just now starting to come up a little bit. Yesterday I started to feel, because how I was telling you, I feel like I'm still lacking the energy. It takes a few pounds to come off before you start to feel it. Usually 10 pounds, 20 pounds, you really start. 30, you feel it more. I've lost weight before. So, we'll see. I got me some greens now.
So we're going to head back to
the... I want to pause right now because I got to collect the greens off the tower gardens out there. So.
Okay, let's go get your greens and show them how you blend it.
Okay, so here's the tower gardens. We're going to pick some greens. These, I believe, are greens, collard greens or something. I just pick a little of everything. This is even bok choy down here, I think. And I just grab a leaf of that, too. I mean, usually you pick it up with Chinese food and stuff, but... greens there, tower garden. I like to rinse them. It's organic and stuff, but you still have bugs landing on them. Things like that. And I've already put the spinach in there. And put the powder in. Complete powder. I don't know how well it's going to fit. Acted pretty good today. I don't know if you want to record while it's on because it's pretty loud. There's some nice background music going on. So let me pulse it real quick here. mix it hand up because I'm making you one today instead of you making me one. Okay.
You're becoming a master blender. This is so exciting, David.
Master blender.
Master blender. Now we have to have shake parties and come up with. It looks so good.
You know what? I gotta tell you something else. A side benefit of this is that this two-fisted drinker, it cures my sweet tooth. Okay, sometimes after I eat my salad, I want something sweet. So sometimes I'll save some of this in a cup in the fridge, and I have it afterwards. And it's God's candy. It's full of natural sugar, so it's not
Praise
so bad for
God.
you, and it cures it. So,
Well, honestly,
there you
I'm
go.
super excited. Thank you. Cheers.
It's so good. And I like you can actually see the green in it. So.
Praise the Lord. Well, Auntie Cookie's here. Praise God. Watching Narnia. Okay, I'm up to 92. Hour and a half. Watching Narnia, my very favorite movie. What fun workout today. Okay, so all done with my workout for today. This is pretty cool. It says exercise duration, 93 minutes and 48 seconds. Ah, shoot. Dang, it went away. Maybe I'll have to look on the thing to see what it said. Anyway, hour and a half, great workout. Feeling Annie, what are you cooking up there? So you're gonna make me.
What's up, guys? Welcome to a legit food review.
A legit food review. What do you? I asked you to make me something healthy for the dinner because I'm really doing the really healthy.
100% butter. It's gonna.
Real funny.
We'll make smashed cauliflower, maybe.
Oh no, that's what I requested. It's very low carb. I saw that on one of the things you can substitute instead of potatoes. It's like, you look up a recipe, Tristan, because I'm trying to put a whole bunch of recipes together that are flavorful, totally low carb, and totally low cal for this diet we're working on. So you guys, masters of the kitchen, while I go up to the TV station to edit the show for the day. Tristan, I told you I did an hour and a half watching Narnia, yeah, on the treadmill. My butt and my legs are killing me. But it was so good. It was really good. So success. Can't wait to get home and see what you guys have cooked up. Amazing dinners from Tristan and Andy. Thanks, guys. Love you. See you in a couple hours. Peace out.
While a variety of aircraft dazzle the crowd from the sky, the main attractions at this air show are on the ground. Two of the United States Air Force's most versatile aircraft have hundreds of people lining up to get a peek.
We are the largest show in town. It's your paratroopers. A lot of people looking at it and asking, oh, this is an awesome static display. How did you get it here? Not realizing that it can take off.
The aircraft is really great.
This C-17 Globemaster is flown by the New York Air National Guard, which for over 11 years has had a working relationship with South Africa through the State Partnership Program.
We're committed to strengthen our relationship with the South African Defense Force. I think secure Africa is not only good for us, but good for the global community. And I think South Africa is a very integral part of that relationship and the future of securing Africa as a whole.
Also making the long journey here is the C-130J from Ramstein Air Base, Germany. The C-17 might be bigger than the C-130, but it's drawing just as big of a crowd.
Well, the C-17 does dwarf us, but I mean, it's our mission that's really special with this plane. It's very versatile and it's ready for anything.
It's nice today.
It's really nice just to interact with the people and just meet the whole new culture. A lot of people haven't seen these planes at all, and just to let them know, these planes exist, and it's good.
Pretty interesting how we take for granted what we do. A lot of people are very intrigued by the airplane, just intrigued by flying in general. So it's good to kind of show the flexibility and the total force of the United States military.
The aircraft on on display do their part. The soldiers and airmen wearing the uniform are drawing plenty of attention as well. A total force team of more than 100 is here to build our partnership by interacting with the crowd, answering questions, smiling for the camera, and moving their feet. Tech Sergeant Bert Trainer, Waterkloof Air Force Base, South Africa.
Hi, Dr. Tony. I'm the mother of a 12-year-old girl who has been undergoing assessment for the last 2 years with no diagnosis. Her ADOS and Gilbert came back inconclusive. Whenever I mention to other workers about the need for a diagnosis, I am treated like a neurotic mother. I've been told that a diagnosis won't make any difference. My daughter will still be my daughter. However, she dropped out of school a month after starting comprehensive. I'm upset with the school for not recognizing or understanding her difficulty in coping. I feel my daughter will need a diagnosis to help her understand herself. She already knows she's different from her peers, and she started to ask why. Am I being a neurotic mother, or is a diagnosis really important? This is Andrea Mason at YouTube.
First of all, a diagnosis is extremely important. We tend to find that classic autism is diagnosed in the preschool years. Asperger's in boys in elementary, but girls tend to be at the high school age. And that's what this girl is now going through, because the girls are better at camouflaging their social difficulties. In other words, the girl is very good at hiding being different. Now, the next thing is the ADOS and the Gilbert criteria are really standardized on the boy's expression, not the girl's expression. So I wouldn't necessarily use those as the ultimate instruments for a diagnostic assessment. Now, will it make a difference? Yes, it will, because she's 12 years old and she's starting to realize that she is different, and the psychological consequences can be depression, can also be anger with the world, a whole range of things that may start to occur. So what they do need is a diagnostic assessment by someone who is experienced in girls and women. Now, this person is in the United Kingdom, and Dr. Judith Gould has specialized in girls and women with Asperger's syndrome, and she may be able to recommend someone who could help in that area. Go ahead and do what you can and seek that diagnostic assessment.
Question number 6. Does Asperger's with a seemingly genetic component appear to pick up momentum through each generation? Should future generations in a family be made aware, just as much as with any other type of genetic disorder or condition? We are undiagnosed, but there is a family pattern, and I'm concerned for the next generations not having an understanding of ASD. This is Dazzle at Autism Hangout.
Okay, first of all, yes, the geneticists say that certain characteristics can become greater through the generations, but it's also a question of who do you have as your partner? Sometimes there's a sort of an attraction, Aspie to Aspie, but also extreme neurotypical to Aspie. And that extreme neurotypical may have in their family history Asperger's syndrome. So you've got two families combining, and like breeding dogs, those characteristics will be accentuated. You'll have more extreme neurotypicals and more Aspies. So, yes, it is a characteristic. Now, the thing is, if it is increasing through generations, what would you do if you're a couple and the geneticist could say there's a strong probability your child will have an autism spectrum disorder? What are you going to do about that? Because if we eliminated, in a sort of racial cleansing, those with Asperger's, we would lose Mozart and Bill Gates and Einstein and all those sorts of people. Mm-hmm. So what may help is it's better to understand the individual, but not to, shall we say, remove that from the human gene pool. Mm-hmm. So yes, I agree. I have found families where it seems to get greater through the generations. However, today we are more sensitive. And what happened years ago was that you could create an isolated lifestyle. You could be in a monastery, for example, Or at school, you just sat at a desk and learned. You didn't work as a group, and there wasn't the concept of the team. So I think in days gone by, Aspies were there.
Yeah, they were less apparent. The next question is about meltdowns. I have a question regarding meltdowns. Sometimes when I suffer from sensory overload, I go into kind of a trance, similar to a computer freezing when too many windows are open. I lose my ability to speak. I have severe difficulties understanding speech. My vision is fuzzy, I feel dizzy, and sometimes sick. I also lose orientation. I can't take anything in, and I'm lost in my own world, and noise and light is even more unbearable than before. Is this a meltdown caused by sensory overload, or is it something else? This is Aspinaut at Autism Hangout.
Yeah, it sounds like it's an overload from sensory experience, and basically your brain has blown a fuse. The thing is, you've got to get out of those situations as fast as you can, and often by reducing sensory experience and solitude, the person can slowly recover. Now, there's an excellent book called From Anxiety to Meltdown by Deborah Lipsky. She describes what happens with a meltdown, with the huge sensory overload. Now, what you try and do is identify those situations where you're likely to experience overload, or internally being aware that your sensory system is becoming overwhelmed by what's happening, and either avoid the situation or try and take your mind off this by some distraction. Some will use a computer game, but I also strongly recommend that you explain to people that you are overwhelmed by the sensory experience, and for a moment take a deep breath and try and reduce the sensory experience. So it sounds very much like a meltdown.
We do it island style. From the mountain to the ocean, from the windward to the leeward side.
From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
People are very hungry for a real discussion in this election, which is otherwise not happening. If we're not in the debates, we will not be talking about the crisis of climate, of war, of race, and the crisis of an entire generation that has basically been thrown under the bus.
With the first presidential debate just a month away, the Republican and Democratic-controlled Commission on Presidential Debates has set rules that will likely prevent any third-party candidate from participating. We'll speak with Green Party nominee Dr. Jill Stein and her running mate, longtime human rights activist Ajamu Baraka.
The Green Party wants to bring something very different from the traditional parties. We want to engage the American people in an honest conversation about democracy, power, and the electoral process.
Plus, we'll go to North Dakota, where the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe is leading a week-long protest against the Dakota Access Pipeline. We'll speak with a former Green vice presidential nominee, Winona LaDuke. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The American Red Cross is calling this week's flooding in Louisiana the worst disaster in the U.S. since Hurricane Sandy in 2012. At least 13 people were killed after historic rainfall submerged parts of Baton Rouge and the surrounding area. State officials say the destruction may result in the worst housing crisis in the region since Hurricane Katrina in 2005. The federal government's declared the area a disaster zone, and state officials say more than 5,000 people remain in emergency shelters. This is a volunteer in Acadia Parish, Louisiana, where public schools remain closed and a curfew remains in place amidst the devastating flooding.
It's very scary, and God has a reason, and I just don't know what it is yet. So the rain's coming some more, and we just don't know what to do. We're trying to do everything we can, and we're running low on everything at the store, so we're trying to get stuff coming in, which we can't because everything's blocked. So the owner's running to Walmart and buying crates and crates and crates of milk so we can pass out here to our little people in our community.
The Louisiana governor's office has said at least 40,000 homes have been damaged or destroyed in Livingston Parish, home to about 138,000 people. It's estimated 75% of the homes have been lost. Aetna, the U.S.'s third largest health insurance company, says it'll cut its participation in the Affordable Care Act's marketplaces next year by at least 2/3 after the Department of Justice blocked its move to merge with another health care company. Aetna claimed it faces more than $300 million in losses this year as a result of the public exchanges, but in a letter sent to the Justice Department in July, Aetna CEO Mark Bertolini threatened that Aetna would reduce its participation in the exchange if the Justice Department blocked its merger with health insurance company Humana. Bertolini wrote, quote, "If the DOJ sues to enjoin the transaction, we'll immediately take action to reduce our 2017 exchange footprint," unquote. Aetna reported a 38% increase in its overall profits last year, despite the loss it reported on the public exchanges. Last month, the Justice Department also sued to block a merger between healthcare giant Cigna and Anthem, which would be the largest health insurance merger in U.S. history. In news from the campaign trail, Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton took aim at Donald Trump's record as an employer during a speech in Ohio Wednesday.
It just really hits me personally when people are standing up and telling their stories. They were small business people. They were plumbers, electricians, painters who did work for Donald Trump, and he refused to pay them. That violates the basic bargain. If you do your job, you're supposed to be rewarded for your work, not stiffed, not told to go sue somebody.
Donald Trump was in New York yesterday for his first classified intelligence briefing with the FBI. Meanwhile, lawmakers in Washington, D.C. began reviewing FBI documents Wednesday detailing the agency's investigation into Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server while serving as Secretary of State. The large binders labeled secret were made available to lawmakers after Republicans requested the information last month following the FBI's decision to recommend no criminal charges be brought against Clinton over the email use. The State Department has also said it'll release some of Clinton's emails to the conservative watchdog group Judicial Watch. Meanwhile, Clinton's campaign continues to face questions after 44 State Department emails released to Judicial Watch reveal close ties between the Clinton Foundation and the State Department during Clinton's time as Secretary of State. Meanwhile, Steve Bannon, the chair of the right-wing outlet Breitbart News, has taken over as Donald Trump's campaign chief. Bannon is a former Goldman Sachs executive who's built Breitbart News into a far right-wing website that regularly sparks controversy with headlines such as "Birth control makes women unattractive and crazy," and "Trannies whine about hilarious Bruce Jenner billboard." The website regularly attacks mainstream figures of the Republican Party, such as former House Speaker John Boehner and former Florida Governor Jeb Bush. Bannon himself is considered to be the most influential figure in conservative media after former Fox News chair Roger Ailes, who's also advising Donald Trump's campaign. A 2015 profile of Bannon called him, quote, "the most dangerous political operative in America," unquote. In international news, the New York Times and the Guardian editorial boards are calling for the U.S. and British governments to end their support for Saudi Arabia's war in Yemen. In an editorial entitled "America is Complicit in the Carnage in Yemen," the Times wrote on Wednesday, quote, "Congress should put the arms sales on hold, and President Obama should quietly inform Riyadh that the United States will withdraw crucial assistance if the Saudis do not stop targeting civilians and agree to negotiate negotiate peace, unquote. With U.S. and British support, Saudi Arabia has been bombing Yemen for 17 months, causing the majority of the conflict's civilian casualties. Last week, the U.S. approved the sale of more than $1 billion of new weapons to the Saudis. Since taking office, the Obama administration's approved more than $110 billion in weapons sales to Saudi Arabia. The Office of UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon has acknowledged that the UN played a role in a cholera epidemic that killed more than 9,000 people. The UN said it would issue a new set of responses to the outbreak in the next 2 months. UN peacekeepers are accused of negligently bringing cholera to Haiti during their deployment following the 2010 Haitian earthquake. A lawsuit in U.S. federal court seeks billions in damages for the victims. Ban Ki-moon's admission does not change the UN's stance. It has legal immunity under a 1946 convention. Meanwhile, in South Sudan, the UN is launching an investigation into allegations that UN peacekeepers did not attempt to prevent multiple cases of abuse and sexual violence against civilians. Last month, troops fighting on behalf of South Sudanese President Salva Kiir went on a nearly 4-hour rampage through a hotel compound frequented by foreign aid workers. Witnesses say civilians were gang raped and a journalist was executed in the attack. Several witnesses told the Associated Press that UN peacekeepers stationed nearby did nothing to stop the violence despite pleas for assistance from those inside the compound. In Turkey, at least 5 police officers were killed and more than 100 people wounded by car bomb attacks in eastern Turkey Wednesday and Thursday. The Turkish government blamed the attacks on Kurdistan Workers' Party, known as the PKK. Earlier this week, Turkish authorities shut down a newspaper in Istanbul and arrested some of its staff after claiming the paper supported the PKK. The newspaper's closure is part of an ongoing crackdown on dissent in Turkey following a failed military coup in July. The Australian government says it'll close the Manus Island Immigration Detention Centre after reports of harsh conditions and rampant abuse there, including for child detainees. Manus is one of 2 offshore detention facilities Australia uses for asylum-seeking migrants. Many of those at the Manus Island facility have spent years in detention and suffer from mental health issues. The Australian government has so far said none of those detained at Manus would be resettled in Australia, but Colin Barnett, the head of Western Australia, said he would welcome their resettlement.
Particularly for families, as long as they don't present a security or safety risk, I do welcome them being in Australia. And the one thing I find unacceptable is children in detention.
In Illinois, Governor Bruce Rauner has signed into law a Domestic Workers' Bill of Rights, which grants domestic workers protections under the state's labor statutes, including minimum wage overtime and time off. Domestic workers are not covered by state or federal labor laws, though some states have similar bills. Wendy Pollack of the Sargent Shriver National Center on Poverty Law said, quote, "This is really historic because the exclusion of domestic workers from federal and state employment laws has an unfortunate history in slavery and anti-immigrant sentiment," unquote. In Oklahoma, funeral services will be held Friday for Khalid Jabara, the Lebanese man police say was killed by his next-door neighbor in a possible hate crime. Police say Stanley Majors will be charged with first-degree murder for Monday's killing and acknowledged he had a long-standing animosity toward Jabara's family. Majors, who is white, is already facing assault charges for hitting Haifa Jabara, Khalid's mother, with his car last year while she was jogging. Before that, Haifa Jabara already had a restraining order against Majors after he had threatened and harassed her. Despite all this, Majors was released on bail earlier this year and returned to his home. The Jabaras say Majors had threatened them and used racial slurs repeatedly since 2013. Majors had been arrested at least once for violating the restraining order before hitting Haifa Jabara with his car. 10 minutes before he was shot on Monday, Khalid Jabara called police to report suspicious activity around the family's home. Police left without speaking to Majors, but admitted to journalists later Majors was known to be hostile to the Jabaras. Victoria Jabara Williams wrote on Facebook, quote, "My family lived in fear of this man and his hatred for years. Yet in May, not even 1 year after he ran over our mother, and despite our repeated protests, he was released from jail with no conditions on his bond, no ankle monitor, no drug alcohol testing, nothing," unquote, wrote Victoria Jabara Williams, Khalid's sister. University of California at Berkeley Chancellor Nicholas Dirks will resign after criticism of his handling of sexual harassment cases and the university's budget. In one case, the law school dean received only a temporary pay cut and orders to undergo counseling after an investigation supported claims he'd sexually harassed a subordinate. And in Brazil, American Olympic swimmers Gunnar Bentz and Jack Conger were pulled off a plane for questioning as they were preparing to leave Rio, amid suspicions that they and their teammates may have lied about their account of being robbed at gunpoint by people posing as police officers. 4 U.S. Olympic swimmers told authorities they were robbed early Sunday as they were returning home after a late-night party, but Brazilian police say there are discrepancies in the swimmers' reports. Police also say closed-circuit TV footage contradicts their stories. In Brazil, filing a false police report is a crime. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Preparations have begun for the first presidential debate. It'll be held September 26th at Hofstra University in Hempstead, New York. While polls show Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton are among the least popular major party candidates to ever run for the White House, it appears no third-party candidates will be invited to take part in the debates. Debates are organized by the Commission on Presidential Debates, which is controlled by the Democratic and Republican parties. Under the Commission's rules, candidates will only be invited if they're polling at 15% in 5 national surveys. Libertarian presidential candidate Gary Johnson and the Greens' Dr. Jill Stein have both witnessed recent surges in support, but neither have crossed the 15% threshold. Johnson's polled as high as 12% nationwide, while Stein has peaked at 6% in recent national polls. But in some demographics, they're both beating Donald Trump. McClatchy recently polled voters under the age of 30 and found 41% back Hillary Clinton, 23% support Johnson, 16% back Jill Stein, while only 9% back Trump. Among African Americans, polls also show Trump behind all 3 other candidates, polling at either 0, 1, or 2%. More than 12,000 people have signed a petition organized by Roots Action calling for a 4-way presidential debate. In a moment, we'll be joined by the Green Party's Jill Stein and her running mate, Ajamu Baraka. But first, I want to turn to George Farah, the founder and executive director of Open Debates. He spoke on Democracy Now! A few years ago about how the Democrats and Republicans took control of the debate process.
The League of Women Voters ran the presidential debate process from 1976 until 1984, and they were a very courageous and genuinely independent, nonpartisan sponsor. And whenever the candidates attempted to manipulate the presidential debates behind closed doors, either to exclude a viable independent candidate or to sanitize the formats, the League had the courage to challenge the Republican Democratic nominees and, if necessary, go public. In 1980, independent candidate John B. Anderson was polling about 12% of the polls. The League insisted that Anderson be allowed to participate because the vast majority of the American people wanted to see him. But Jimmy Carter, President Jimmy Carter, refused to debate him. The League went forward anyway and held a presidential debate with an empty chair showing that Jimmy Carter wasn't going to show up. 4 years later, when the Republican Democratic nominees tried to get rid of difficult questions by vetoing 80 of the moderators that they had proposed to host the debates, the League said this is unacceptable. They held a press conference and attacked the campaigns for trying to get rid of difficult questions. And lastly, in 1988 was the first attempt by the Republican and Democratic campaigns to negotiate a detailed contract. It was tame by comparison, a mere 12 pages. It talked about who could be in the audience and how the format would be structured, but the League found that kind of lack of transparency and that kind of candidate control to be fundamentally outrageous and antithetical to our democratic process. They released the contract and stated they refused to be an accessory to the hoodwinking of the American people and refused to implement it. And today, what do we have? We have a private corporation that was created by the Republican Democratic parties called the Commission on Presidential Debates. It seized control of the presidential debates precisely because the League was independent, precisely because this women's organization had the guts to stand up to the candidates that the major party candidates had nominated.
That was George Farah, founder and executive director of Open Debates, speaking on Democracy Now! In 2012. He's the author of No Debate, How the Republican and Democratic Parties Secretly Control the Presidential Debates. Well, joining us now is Green Party presidential nominee Dr. Jill Stein, along with her running mate, Ajamu Baraka, a longtime human rights activist. Baraka is the founding executive director of the U.S. Human Rights Network and coordinator of the U.S.-based Black Left Unity Network's Committee on International Affairs. Affairs. We welcome you both to Democracy Now! So, September 26th, that's the first presidential debate. What are your plans, Dr. Jill Stein?
Our plans are to be in that debate because it's not just about whether our party will be included, it's whether the American people will have a voice, whether we will have a real discussion of the crisis of jobs, of the climate, of race, of war, these and the crisis of a generation, an entire generation that's basically been hung out to dry, that cannot get out of predatory student loan debt, that doesn't have the jobs they need and doesn't have a climate future to look forward to. So these are really the critical issues that people want to discuss. We saw an incredible surge of a response last night when we had our first primetime TV. And I want to note that while we've come up to 6 and even 7% in the polls, this has happened without any media coverage really whatsoever on, in the mainstream media. So it's absolutely remarkable that we've not only doubled and tripled, even more than that, because we were invisible as of about 2 months ago in the polls. Suddenly we're up there. So there's an enormous interest in what we're talking about.
So let's go back to 2012. The debate then was at Hofstra, as it will be on September 26th. You and your running mate then, Sherry Hunkala, were arrested as you attempted to enter the site of the presidential debate at Hofstra. Democracy Now! Was there at the time of your arrest.
Well, we're here to stand our ground. We're here to stand ground for the American people who have been systematically locked out of these debates for decades by the Commission on Presidential Debates. We think that this commission is entirely illegitimate, that if democracy truly prevailed, there would be no such commission, that the debates would still be run by the League of Women Voters, that the debates would be open with the criteria that the League of Women Voters had always used, which was that if you have done the work to get on the ballot, if you are on the ballot and could actually win the Electoral College by being on the ballot in enough states, that you deserve to be in the election and you deserve to be heard, and that the American people actually deserve to hear choices which are not bought and paid for by multinational corporations and Wall Street.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are obstructing the vehicle of pedestrians and traffic. If you refuse to move, you are subject to arrest. Remove them, bring them back to the rest of the place. Come on, man. Step up, please. Stand up. We'll help you. Come on. Thank you. Thank you, ladies. Watch the flag, please. Thank you, ladies. Who's spotted us? Thank you. Come with us, man. Just come with us. Thank you, man.
Okay,
you guys got to
thank
stay
you.
here.
All right, everybody, we're going to ask you to please move back. Okay.
Well, I'd say this is what democracy looks like in the 21st century. I'm afraid it's going to take some politics of courage here to get our democracy back. So, more to come.
More to come, you said. So you're taken away, Dr. Jill Stein, from the Hofstra campus. Where did you and Sherry Hunkala, where were you taken?
We were taken to a dark site where nobody knew where we were, an unmarked facility that was basically being run by, I think, Homeland Security and the Secret Service and local police. We were surrounded by, according to Sherry, who counted them, some 16 police and colleagues, and handcuffed tightly to these metal chairs for about 7 hours.
7 hours?
7 hours until the debates were long over and everyone had gone home. It was, I think, an incredible testimony to how fearful the political establishment was and is, that people should learn that they actually have another choice in that race, and all the more so in this race, because we know that the current candidates of the Democratic and Republican parties are the most unpopular, the most disliked and untrusted presidential candidates in history. So people are clamoring for another choice. And we, we're building a campaign to get into the debates, and we'll keep people posted as to what our actions will be coming up. But we will not leave this just to the establishment to shut down political opposition, which is what this commission is doing.
Do you plan to head to Hofstra on September 26th?
Absolutely. Whether we are in the debate or whether we are locked out of the debate, you can be sure that we're going to be there, and we're not going to be there alone. We're going to be there with the American people who are demanding that we open up the debate and make it a real service to our democracy.
You've sued?
We have 2 cases, one of which has been dismissed. The other one is still technically in effect. We are not holding our breath that this is going to be favorably decided in a court of law, but there's every reason for this to be decided in the court of public opinion, where public opinion is very clear that people have had it, not only with the rigged economy, but the rigged political system, and with the dialogue, which is rigged by the Democratic and Republican parties. This commission is a private corporation run by the 2 political parties. The League of Women Voters called it a fraud being perpetrated on the American public. We're not going to settle for that.
Earlier this year, I spoke to Libertarian presidential candidate Gary Johnson in his home state of New Mexico. He talked about the unfair nature of the presidential debate system as well.
Right now, running for president of the United States as a libertarian, there is no way that a third party wins. There's no way that I have a chance of winning unless I'm in the presidential debates. There is the possibility of being at 15% in the polls, though, if I'm in the polls, that I could be in the presidential debates.
You're part of a lawsuit going after the Presidential Debate Commission?
Yes, on the basis that on the basis of the Sherman Act, that politics is a business, that Democrats and Republicans collude with one another to exclude everybody else. We think that the discovery phase of this lawsuit is going to provide national insight into just how rigged the system is. I come back to the fact that 50% of Americans right now declare themselves as independent. Where is that representation?
That was former New Mexico Governor Gary Johnson, who's running on the Libertarian line for president. We're talking to Dr. Jill Stein, presidential nominee of the Green Party. When we come back from break, you'll meet her running mate, Ajamu Baraka, new to the electoral scene, the vice presidential nominee for the Green Party. Stay with us.
Hey, American dream, 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 dream. Hey, American dream, going up in smoke. Time is to present, your promises are broke. Times are changing, it ain't a joke. Hey, revolution, take back your vote. Take back your vote, yeah. It don't matter what you say or do when you sense that the government ain't working for you. Every politician's got goods to pay into the hands of the company man, paying his way.
American Dream by the folk duo Somebody's Sister. And yes, that is Dr. Jill Stein on vocals, the Green Party presidential nominee. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We are speaking with Green Party nominee Dr. Jill Stein and her running mate, Ajamu Baraka. He is a longtime human rights activist. Baraka is the founding executive director of the U.S. Human Rights Network, coordinator of the U.S.-based Black Left Unity Network's Committee on International Affairs. You are new to the electoral scene, Ajamu Baraka.
Yes.
Tell us a little about yourself. You grew up in Chicago?
I grew up on the south side of Chicago. I ended up in the military. And after the military, I ended up in the South, and I went south to organize in the mid to late 70s. There I got involved in, of course, a lot of the anti-apartheid work, along with community organizing. Was involved in the Central American Solidarity Movement, organizing delegations to Nicaragua in support of the unfolding revolution in that country. And all the time moving toward human rights. Ended up volunteering with Amnesty International and ended up on the board in the mid-90s. I saw myself as someone that was trying to continue the legacy of Du Bois and Malcolm X in terms of internationalizing the struggle of African people in the U.S.
You mentioned Du Bois, W.E.B. Du Bois, who taught at Clark Atlanta University, or then I guess Atlanta University, where you went to school.
Well, I went to grad school there. It was the place where you went in the 80s if you were a progressive, a radical, a black radical. and that was the place I ended up going. I had a chance to go other places, but it was recommended to me to go to AU if I really wanted to steep myself in a kind of theory that we needed to advance the struggle in this country.
So talk about the U.S. Human Rights Network that you set up, and explain what you did there.
Well, you know, the network was the first network ever established in this country to apply international human rights standards and law to the United States of America. You know, people tend to think of human rights issues being something out there in other places, and excluding and giving a pass to the U.S. Well, we said that we have to have one standard for all nations. And so this network that was established with about 20, 30 organizations quickly grew to over 300 organizations. Most of the civil rights and human rights organizations in this country ended up a part of that network. And we held the U.S. accountable. We organized around human rights. We educated people on human rights. We took people to Geneva to testify on their own behalf. We talked about the agency of people in terms of how we build and enforce our own human rights. So this was part of a radical reinterpretation of human rights.
No, that's very significant. I remember being there years ago in the early 90s testifying about what was happening in East Timor.
Yes.
And there was this U.S. delegation that was there that was talking about what's often referred to in the United States as civil rights, talking about what happens to African Americans here, but bringing it to an international forum. So explain how you reframe civil rights and why you see it as an international issue that should be dealt with by an international body, why you saw the UN as the place for that.
Well, you know, at the end of the Second World War, Du Bois and others understood that we had to internationalize our struggle. They saw that the framework we had to appeal to was, in fact, a human rights framework. And so what we said in the 1990s was that we were going from civil rights back to human rights. That basically it was clear that the U.S. was not prepared to not only defend and protect the constitutional rights of African Americans and others, but they had completely ignored the human rights obligations that they had. So for us, it was reconnecting. It was connecting our struggles with the rest of the world. Because what's happening around the world is an international struggle for freedom, a struggle against oppression, a struggle that says that basically we all have certain fundamental rights, that we have a right to live in dignity. And so therefore we wanted to link up with that international struggle. And the only way you do that is within the context of this human rights framework.
And so how do you view, for example, the Black Lives Matter movement today? Does it give you hope?
It gives me a lot of hope. I mean, these are human rights fighters. I'm so proud at the evolution of that movement. The recent release of their platform, the Movement for Black Lives, that is, about a week or so ago, demonstrated a real understanding of the interrelated issues that we have to fight against in this country and globally. One aspect of their platform was that they understood, like the young organizers in SNCC back in the 1960s, that you have to connect up internationally. And they expressed their solidarity with the struggling people of Palestine. That was very, very significant because that puts them squarely within the context of the proud tradition of Black internationalism. So I'm very, very encouraged by the evolution.
As a vice presidential candidate now, what do you want to see in Israel-Palestine?
We want to see peace. We want to see a recognition of the rights of Palestinians to self-determination. We want to see an end to the colonial relationship. Like any people we know, Palestinians want to live. They want to live free. They don't want to be subjected to the kind of brutality that's a part of their everyday life. See, I've been to Palestine. I've seen the reality. I had a chance to move across the entire West Bank. I think if any person in this country, if they had a chance to go to Palestine and experience and see what I saw, there's no way that they could support the notion that it is an automatic sort of moral obligation to support the existence and the continuation of the Israeli state's ability to impose itself on the Palestinian people. They will be opposed to that.
How has your message, Dr. Jill Stein, on Israel-Palestine and what you're demanding, the planks in the Green Party platform, been covered and received?
Well, really, none of our planks have been covered and received. Not only our position on Israel-Palestine, our position on foreign policy, our position on jobs and climate and student debt. We've basically been disappeared from the mainstream conversation. But I have to say, you know, in terms of our own outreach and our, you know, the reach of our social media and our campaign and the independent media like yourself that actually does its job responsibly, the reception has been incredible. And we've been able to put Israel-Palestine into a much broader human rights framework, actually, because one of the big criticisms that's always been leveled against, for example, the BDS campaign, the boycott, divestment, and sanctions campaign against this occupying force, this military force, one of the criticisms is that, oh, you're singling out Israel. So we've made it a point to say we're not singling out anybody. This is a general standard of international law and human rights that our administration, our Green administration, would apply to all countries. So we are saying if countries are in violation of international law and human rights, as Israel is for its occupations, its home demolitions, its assassinations, and so on, that we will not support you. And right now we're supporting Israel to the tune of $8 million a day. But we'll say the same thing to the Saudis. We should not be selling weapons or otherwise supporting the Saudis. And as you pointed out on this show, $110 billion in the last decade and rising despite the human rights abuses and the war crimes being committed by the Saudis with U.S. assistance, in fact. You know, this is one of many issues that I think people are really clamoring to hear more about.
Do you join the call of the New York Times and Guardian editorial boards for U.S. and British governments to end their support of Saudi Arabia?
I would say they are joining our call, which has been long-standing for the length of our campaign.
Here I am talking to both of you, but it's conceivable that you would have occupied Jamu Baraka's position as vice presidential nominee if you got the deal you were trying to cement with Bernie Sanders to be top of the ticket of the Green Party once he lost the Democratic Party nomination. What happened there?
Well, you know, it was an offer that we made to Sanders that let's sit down and talk. Let's collaborate because this is an incredibly historic moment. He had an incredibly historic campaign that really unveiled how much momentum there is for deep change here. Not that we aligned completely, especially around foreign policy and on issues of student debt and so on. There was some distance between us, but he was beginning to move in our direction. And we said, let's sit down and let's explore how we can collaborate. And we could bring this to the Green Party convention because as a candidate, I obviously couldn't say, here, Bernie will be our nominee, any more than I could say I would be our nominee. It's up to the delegates. But if we saw eye to eye, and if Bernie came to understand why it is that we need an independent third-party politics, why you cannot have a revolutionary campaign inside of a counter-revolutionary party that essentially sabotaged Bernie's campaign in so many ways, as we saw from the email revelations, from the very fact of the superdelegates that took decision-making out of the hands of a democratic process. You know,
did you ever speak to Bernie Sanders about this?
We tried many times. I was able to get...
You mean you tried?
I tried. The Green Party tried. We had many people trying for us. We had emails that were delivered to him and that we know did get into his hands. But, you know, Bernie said from the start he was in this to basically support and continue building the Democratic Party. He has, ironically, not been a supporter of independent third parties, although nominally he's been one, but he doesn't believe in actually standing up and challenging power in an electoral way. And I think there's a generational difference between Bernie and his vision of the Democrats as the party of the New Deal and a younger generation that sees the Democrats as the party of war, Wall Street, drone attacks.
Although he certainly mobilized them, Jamu Baraka, from outside and inside this country. What is your assessment watching Bernie Sanders and his campaign? Where do you agree? Where do you differ?
I think that Bernie Sanders was responsible for really broadening the conversation here in this country. There's no doubt about that. We were concerned, though, that the silence on the foreign policy issues was troubling. Because we understood that the American people were ready for a real change. And we wanted Bernie Sanders to understand that he didn't have to embrace the aggressive policies of the Obama administration. He didn't have to embrace the drone warfare. He didn't have to be silent on the Saudis and Yemen. So we had some concerns, but we know that there are young people who were very committed to this revolution, and many of them have come over to the Green Party, and more, I think, are considering. I think when they see that we're serious about this, that we're serious about really continuing this political revolution, I think that from outside the country, people see that the only alternative for real progressive politics in the U.S. is, in fact, the Green Party. And they see that there is real opportunity for us to expand the democratic process in this country, and they support it.
I wanted to go back to the Democratic Convention when Juan Gonzalez and I hosted a debate between the Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Chris Hedges, used to be with the New York Times, and former Labor Secretary Robert Reich about the presidential race. Hedges has endorsed the Green Party ticket, the two of you. Robert Reich is now backing Hillary Clinton after endorsing Bernie Sanders during the primaries. This is what the former Labor Secretary Reich had to say.
I'm just saying that your conscience needs to be aware that if you do not support Hillary Clinton, you are increasing the odds of a true, clear, and present danger to the United States, a menace to the United States. And you're increasing the possibility that there will not be a progressive movement, there will not be anything we believe in the future, because the United States will really be changed for the worse. That's not a risk I'm prepared to take at this point in time. I'm going to do exactly what I've been doing for the last 40 years. I'm going to continue to beat my head against the wall, to build and contribute to building a progressive movement. The day after Election Day, I am going to try to work with Bernie Sanders and anybody else who wants to work in strengthening a third party. And again, maybe it's the Green Party for the year 2020, and do everything else I was just talking about. But right now, as we lead up to Election Day 2016, I must urge everyone who is listening or who is watching to do whatever they can to make sure that Hillary Clinton is the next president and not Donald Trump.
That is Labor Secretary Robert Reich, who supported Bernie Sanders, but now is supporting Hillary Clinton. Dr. Jill Stein.
Well, you know, I mean, it's one thing to say that in the future we will build a party of resistance, and another, you know, to say, well, we just can't do it now, you know, because when is this going to get better? You know, we've been really in a race to the bottom between two corporate parties that enable each other to continue moving to the right. And it's not going to get better unless we make it get better. This politics of fear has basically delivered everything that we are afraid of. All the reasons people are told to vote for the lesser evil, because you didn't want the expanding wars, you didn't want the meltdown of the climate, the massive Wall Street bailouts, the attack on immigrants. That's exactly what we've gotten. The answer, you know, to this crisis and this right-wing extremism is to stand up with a truly progressive agenda, and we have to fight for that. If we're ever going to get out of this mess, we need to begin building our power now.
Well, Donald Trump visited a Milwaukee suburb, West Bend, on Tuesday, where he called for more police to patrol low-income communities. His visit came only days after the uprising in Milwaukee, sparked by the fatal police shooting of 23-year-old African-American Sylville Smith. Trump spoke in front of an overwhelmingly white audience in West Bend, Wisconsin, which is about 95% white.
The problem in our poorest communities is not that there are too many police. The problem is that there are not enough police. More law enforcement, more community engagement, more effective policing is what our country needs desperately. Just like Hillary Clinton is against the minors, she is against the police, believe me.
So that's Donald Trump. In fact, it was billed as his appeal to the African-American community, Jamu Baraka. They said next he'll be appealing to the Latino community. So far, his support sort of floats between 0, 1, and 2% support in the African-American community. Your response to what he said?
Well, that's we can't afford those kind of appeals, because that was basically an appeal to neo-fascism. That was an appeal to his base. It was an appeal that said basically the only way we can be safe, that is white folks, is to make sure that we have those dangerous black people under full control. That any kind of oppositional activity, any kind of expressions of resistance has to be crushed by the state. So we understand his game, and he won't be successful. It's clear about that. But he is playing with some very dark forces here in this country, and that's why people are concerned. That's why they are fearful, and that's the weapon that the Democrats have used to herd people back onto the Democratic plantation. But as Dr. Stein just said, you know, we're not afraid of Donald Trump or anybody else, because you know what, we believe in the ability of the American people to resist, to defend democracy. So we say, when do we begin to confront these right-wing forces? Because every 4 years, they're going to have someone to present that's going to scare many, many people. But you know what? If those scary individuals are confronted by an organized and determined electorate, an organized and determined people, we're not going to be concerned about that.
Earlier this week, Donald Trump repeated his call for immigration to be suspended from parts of the world and for new ideological tests for all immigrants.
In the Cold War, we had an ideological screening test. The time is overdue to develop a new screening test for the threats we face today. I call it extreme vetting.
Dr. Jill Stein, extreme vetting. He talked about vetting for people who criticize the Constitution or express bigotry.
Thought police is what he's talking about. Let's exercise thought police over people coming into this country. Next step will be thought police over people who are in this country already. And, you know, the idea that we could control terrorism by exercising thought police over people coming in is preposterous when, you know, when it's people here as well, you know, who are subject to being radicalized and becoming extremists because their lives are miserable, because they've been locked out of society. You know, as Ajamu was saying, we are an organized resistance. We are a different way forward. We don't need to simply, you know, sit in terror of what Donald Trump represents, because we not only have solutions to these crises, we have the numbers that it takes. We don't need to be a movement that splits the vote. We could, in fact, actually flip the vote. There are...
Let me play an ad that Hillary Clinton has released. I believe tomorrow Donald Trump will be releasing his first. We don't know exactly the role Roger Ailes is playing, famous for his advising George H.W. Bush, Reagan, and others. We know what is said behind the scenes as he is helping Donald Trump prep for the debate. But this is Hillary Clinton's ad that has been titled Role Models. It's about Donald Trump.
I love the old days. You know what they used to do to guys like that when they were in a place like this? They'd be carried out on a stretcher, folks. And you can tell them to go themselves. I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay? It's like incredible. When Mexico sends its people, they're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists.
You know, you could see there was blood coming out of her eyes, blood coming out of her wherever.
You got to see this guy. Oh, I don't know what I said. Oh, I don't remember. He's going like, I don't remember.
Our children and grandchildren will look back at this time, at the choices we are about to make, the goals we will strive for, the principles we will live by, and we need to make sure that they can be proud of us.
I'm Hillary Clinton, and I approve this message.
That is being seen as whatever position you take, as one of the most powerful in many years, Donald Trump, in his own words. But it is a challenge to you. It's probably the most powerful challenge to third parties, is what Hillary Clinton is saying is, can we afford this? Is this who you want to be? For our radio listeners, what they continually showed as Donald Trump was saying those things was children watching. The children are watching.
Yes, and you know, what this ad says is we must vote against Donald Trump. It doesn't tell us what we are voting for. And that's exactly the problem, that Donald Trump represents this right-wing extremism, this neo-fascism. That doesn't go away by bringing in another set of neoliberal policies. Remember where this economic crisis came from that is lifting up the insecurity and the economic misery that undergirds Donald Trump. This comes from the policies that were led by the Clintons, by Bill, and advocated by Hillary, including Wall Street deregulation, including NAFTA and the offshoring of our jobs, including the 1990s crime bill and the opening of the floodgates to mass incarceration. The solutions that Hillary Clinton provides are more of the same. It will be more of that economic security and misery that feeds right-wing extremism. This is not the alternative to Donald Trump. And we agree, let's not vote for Donald Trump, but let's vote for a future that actually serves the needs of the American people. That won't come from a candidate like Hillary, who's sponsored by the banks and the war profiteers.
Dr. Jill Stein and Jamu Baraka, Green Party presidential and vice presidential nominees. I'd like to ask you to stay. We're going to go to North Dakota, but we're going to speak with a former vice presidential nominee, Winona LaDuke, about an energy struggle that's going on in North Dakota. And maybe she has some advice, having run in 1996 and also in 2000 along with Ralph Nader as a Green Party candidate, and what that process was like. This is Democracy Now! When we come back, we'll be in Bismarck, North Dakota. Stay with us.
We are the tribe that they cannot see. We live on an industrial reservation. We are the Halusa Nation. We have been called the Indians. We have been called Native American. We have been called hostile. We have been called pagan. We have been called militant. We have been called many names. We are the Halusa Nation. We are the human beings. The callers of names cannot see us, but we can see them.
We are the Halusa Nation by A Tribe Called Red, featuring John Trudell and Northern Voice. Here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman as we turn to a growing protest in North Dakota where hundreds of indigenous activists have shut down construction on a multi-billion-dollar pipeline project. The $3.8 billion Dakota Access Pipeline is slated to carry 500,000 barrels of Bakken crude from North Dakota to Illinois. But members of the Standing Rock Sioux tribe say the pipeline threatens to contaminate the Missouri River, which provides water not only for thousands of residents on the reservation, but also for millions living downstream. On April 1st, members of the Standing Rock Sioux tribe launched an ongoing protest camp called Sacred Stone. Since late July, when U.S. Army Corps of Engineers approved the pipeline, at least 28 people have been arrested as people have used their bodies and horses to block construction. This is one of the protesters.
We do this for the next 7 generations. We do this for the unborn children that are coming to this world. We're protecting the water. Our water is life. We will not let it get desecrated. They are not allowed to make no pipelines on this land.
For more on the pipeline, we are joined by Winona LaDuke, Executive Director of the group Honor the Earth and former Green Party Vice Presidential nominee in '96 and 2000. We're also joined by Joy Braun of the Indigenous Environmental Network. She's been at the Sacred Stone Resistance Camp since the first day of the protests. Let's begin with Winona LaDuke. What are you demanding right now? And for people who have never heard of this action, please place it for us geographically and in the bigger context of energy activism.
Well, hello there. Just to be clear, I come actually from northern Minnesota, and we spent 4 years fighting a pipeline called the Sandpiper. The pipeline is by the Enbridge Company. The Enbridge Company announced last week that it was going to shelve the Sandpiper and move out here to the Dakota Access, assuming that they could get a much faster way, because we have successfully resisted them for 4 years. So basically, Amy, what's happening is that there's a replumbing of North American energy infrastructure, and there's a whole bunch of oil interests that want to move oil, from the tar sands, and in between them are indigenous people. And so we're looking at a 640,000 barrel per day pipeline, and they're looking at, now it looks like we're looking at this other pipeline out here. But, that is what's going on. And out here on the front lines, the question is, at what point are we going to quit? At what point are we going to quit doing this? We got a country with aging infrastructure, and they're trying to put in new infrastructure, and we got a company that has lots of structural anomalies and 800 spills, including the Kalamazoo spill. A lot of risk to a lot of people, and just the wrong thing to be doing.
Joy Braun, can you talk about the good news you received yesterday?
Ihani Day, everybody. Good morning. So the news that we got yesterday was that if we allowed the Dakota Access to come in and remove the bulldozers and earth movers that they had moved in, that they would stop construction until the August 24th hearing in Washington, D.C. We said that we wanted it in writing, and we wanted it in writing sent to Standing Rock Chairman Dave Archambault and a copy sent to us on the front line.
Can you talk about the Sacred Stone Resistance Camp that you began on April 1st and what your demands are, again, for people who know nothing about what you're doing in North Dakota?
So the Sacred Stone Spirit Camp was started as an action of prayer. We had went to ceremony, and the ceremony said that we needed to do everything in prayer. And as long as we prayed and we could bring awareness to the world that this pipeline could be stopped, that these snakes' heads could be cut off, these snakes being these pipelines. And so we went ahead and set up camp in the snow, and we've been there since April 1st.
It's very interesting that this is taking place as Baton Rouge is underwater. And so far, I think 13 people are dead. The fires in Southern California now has displaced tens of thousands of people. And the country, many parts of it, like in the Northeast, are in a heat dome right now. Winona, I want to tie this into this electoral season, this pivotal 2016 presidential election year. We're joined here in New York by the Green Party presidential candidate, Dr. Jill Stein, as well as her running mate, who occupies the position you did in 1996 and 2000. Talk about where you see your action and whether you have faith in electoral politics now.
Well, greetings to you from the Green Party, my fellow Greens out there. What I would say is that the system is crumbling all around us, and it's the end of the fossil fuel era. It's time to move towards an elegant transition. But in the final thrashings of the fossil fuel era, what you have is a lot of extreme behavior going on. You have extreme extraction. You have, tar sands mining. You have blowing up, oil rigs, and you have, endless contamination. And at the same time, you have climate change happening. In our teachings, we talk about this as the time when you got to make a choice between two paths as a country. One path is well-worn and it's scorched. The other is not well-worn and it's green. Not just talking Green Party, I'm saying that there is a path out there of enlightened practice where instead of burning more fossil fuels, we move to renewable energy, we move to local food, we move to more community control, and we move beyond a place where corporations are natural persons under the law. You know, I'm out here on the front lines. I'm out here in North Dakota. I live in northern Minnesota. We've been battling these pipelines for the past 4 years. You know, we have no oil where we are, but we are, you know, they propose to lay us to waste with pipelines to get that oil to Superior and out to larger markets. So to me, it's a systemic set of questions. You know, it's a telling time in American politics, but it's really a telling time in America that we have to make some choices on where we're going to be going.
Winona, when you ran for office in 1996 and 2000, was that your first foray into electoral politics?
That was my first time, and I was listening to Jill talk about the debates, and I remember being not allowed in the debates, and I have a little picture of me and Ralph that said, you know, we couldn't even appear in the room of the debates. We were like banned from the debates, and so I'm like, good luck, Jill.
Do you have advice for Ajamu Baraka, who is in the same position you are, first-time electoral politics, vice presidential nominee like you were?
Good luck, buddy.
And Ajamu Baraka, I wanted to ask you your assessment of Barack Obama today.
He's been a huge failure, disappointment for millions of people. We understand he still has a lot of support, but he had a historic opportunity to take this country in a new direction, and he, because of his ideological orientation, he ended up basically just supporting a continuation of the status quo. We have to move in a new direction. We have to have real racial justice. We have to have real justice for people who are suffering, who feel in their bones that things are bad and will get worse. We have to have hope, real hope this time, organized hope that the people are the only force that can really advance this revolutionary process here in this country. Not any politician, but the people.
Does this give you renewed hope in electoral politics? I'm sure you have been very much outside of that scene.
You know, when Dr. Stein asked me to consider being a part of this, I knew that the historical conditions were ripe. I knew that we had a chance to really use the electoral process to advance people's agenda. I knew that there was going to be a tremendous support for this Green Party push. So it's about electoral process, but it's about building popular power. And when Dr. Stein said the theme of this campaign was about putting power back in the hands of the people, I said, I'm with Jill. Sign me up.
We're going to wrap up right now. I want to thank everyone for joining us. Winona LaDuke of Honor the Earth, Joy Braun of the Indigenous Environmental Network, thanks so much for being with us from North Dakota. And I want to thank Dr. Jill Stein, as well as Ajamu Baraka, the presidential and vice presidential nominees of the Green Party. I'll be speaking in Seattle, Washington at the Sheraton Seattle Hotel on Friday night, along with Kshama Savant and Walden Bello. Check our website at democracynow.org. Democracy Now! Is produced by Mike Burke, Carla Wills, Laura Gottesdiener, Nermeen Sheikh, Dina Guzder, Sam Alkoff, Ravi Karen, Hani Masood, Tarina Nadura, Andre Lewis. Bill Noguera and Paul Huckabee are engineers. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks for joining us.
Mike.
Programs airing on the Olelo Community Media channels are presented by independent producers in the community's interest. The opinions and views expressed do not necessarily represent the views of Olelo Community Media or its management.
We do it island style. From the mountain to the ocean, from our windward to the leeward side. Thank you.